Good afternoon, everybody. I see it is 1 p.m., so I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Governance and Priorities Committee for the City of Nanaimo for Monday, March 27th, 2023, and respectfully acknowledge that we are holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk today is Ms. Sheila Gurry, and today's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period. Sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only, please. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. And council members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically. Today, I see that we have Councillor Perino joining us. Welcome, Councillor Perino. And as acting mayor, it is my turn to chair this Governance and Priorities Committee meeting today. I'm Councillor Ian Thorpe. Announcement or introduction, rather, of late items. Ms. Gurry, I'm not aware of anything, and I see a shake of the head, so no late items. So I would ask for a motion for approval of the agenda. Mayor Krogh and Councillor Eastmere seconding. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. And a motion for adoption of minutes. Minutes have been circulated from the regular Governance and Priorities meeting held here in the Conference Centre on Monday, March 13th of 2023. Councillor Hemmons and Councillor Armstrong seconding. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thanks very much, everybody. Next item on the agenda, number 5, agenda planning. Governance and Priorities Committee agenda planning to be introduced by Ms. Gurry, and she's going to outline some topics.
Thank you, Chair. So on page 7 of your agenda package is a GPC schedule of upcoming meetings. This is ahead of schedule. The final discussion on, or the next discussion, it's never the final one, on GPC, the committee as well as other committees will be on April 26th, which is a special GPC meeting that we've scheduled that is on this schedule. And ahead of that, we had discussed at February 13th at that GPC meeting when we talked about committees and the Governance and Priorities Committee that we would have a 6-month matrix or schedule of upcoming meetings. So what is on your agenda today and will be fleshed out a little bit more on April 26th is a schedule of the next 6 months, etc. It goes past 6 months of meetings. So from today, starting today, the second half of today's agenda, as well as through to the end of May, you'll be going through the City Plan Integrated Action Plans. So that is starting today, and as you can see, it's scheduled for the next few Governance and Priorities Committee meetings. And then into June, we have the Ethics Commissioner bylaw that was requested to have a review, a discussion on that, and next steps moving forward. And then in June, I believe Mr. Lindsay will have some things. I'll update this for you at the next Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. And July, we have nothing scheduled as of yet. And then just to highlight, in August and September, there is no GPC meeting scheduled with the Mondays, so you might see an extra GPC meeting try to be scheduled in September, depending on what we need to get through and our further discussions we have on the 26th. So that's it, Chair. Any questions, I'd be happy to take.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. I see Councillor Hemmons with a question.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Gurry. We had indicated to the neighbourhood associations that we would be hosting them back. Will we do that at a GPC, and therefore it's something we should be thinking about in our upcoming calendar, or will we do that?
Hosting, pardon me, Councillor Hemmons, I missed the first part of that.
Sorry, our reconnection with the neighbourhood associations.
Yes, so pardon me, that is happening April the 26th as well. It's outside of a GPC meeting. I think the format is going to be more of that World Cafe format. So that is scheduled for April 26th, but it's outside of the GPC format, so it's not noted on this calendar. But we will be having that engagement session. You will be having that engagement session with the neighborhood associations on that day is the day I believe it's planned.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Council? Then we will move right into our reports, and we have 3 very important and topical reports today to deal with, and I'm going to be certainly cognizant of time as we move through the afternoon. Community wellness and livability is the topic, and our first report is Downtown Nanaimo Community Safety Action Plan Update, to be introduced first of all by Mr. Lindsay, and I think he's going to turn things over, but we'll start with Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Council. Maybe before I start, just to add to that last point of discussion with the neighborhood associations, we do have a report coming to you. I believe it's on Monday night on your agenda, just to get Council's sign off on the format we plan on using for that day. So a confirmation of the day at that time, and the overall kind of how we see the evening operating. But we just want to get Council's approval on that. So you'll hear more about that on Monday. Back to this meeting through the chair. As you mentioned, the end of the day, we really was the original intent was to have our kickoff today for the integrated action plan, and we're going to be moving that through GPC over the next couple of months with the intent of hoping to have a final action plan in front of you later this year. The first section we wanted to focus on today is tied into this, as you mentioned, the community wellness and livability sections, but also we had intended to kind of do an update on public safety. And I think at our last council meeting, there was a number of questions and a number of statements around public safety, and we thought it would be a good opportunity to have this little bit of today carved off to have that discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. LeBerge in a moment, who's just going to give you an update about the downtown safety plan. You know, we're about 6 months out since council endorsed that. And then Ms. Wood's going to do an update on community safety and security. And really, it's a reminder, I guess, to the community about all of the initiatives that council is supporting across the spectrum, from upstream to downstream, on the issue of community safety. So a little bit of a reminder of those programs and updates, and happy to answer questions as we go along. But as to kick off the day, I'll turn it over now to Mr. LeBerge.
Thank you very much, Mr. LeBerge. Welcome, and Ms. Clark. Certainly, it's a topic that's on a lot of our citizens' lips, and council hears about it, and we take some criticism, but I think I want to start this session, before I turn the microphone to you, to start by saying that there is a lot being done. The city is aware of the challenges that we face. We are handling them as best we can, both council and staff, and we appreciate the work of our staff in all areas. So, Mr. LeBerge, please fill us in.
Oh, thank you, Chair, and thanks for your time this afternoon, committee. I understand I have about 15 minutes to relay a lot of information. There will be a lot of questions. I'm going to try and keep this really high level, but basically we're here to talk about the Downtown Safety Action Plan that was passed by council last April. And this brought $2.5 million of annual investments that provide new and enhanced resources downtown, focusing both on public safety and cleanliness in the downtown core. Chair, I'd just like to start with a quick summary of the plan for the new councillors. Basically, we started back in 2021 with Nielsen Consultants, and basically the assignment was to extensively consult with the community and report back. And what they found, they recognized that the situation downtown at that time was acute, and there was an imperative for quick action to respond to the serious challenges that were impacting the downtown. They were asked to provide strategies that would not only improve safety, but also the appeal and the vitality and the health of the downtown core. It was understood that the responses to this plan would tie into the Health and Housing Task Force recommendations and have a downstream focus, and that the problems wouldn't be dramatically reduced without significant upstream solutions. So the results that were expected was that we would have some strategies to provide some quick responses to social disorder downtown. Things like problematic behavior, conflicts that occurred on the street, recurring incidents of property damage, and then the ever-present litter and filth in public spaces that occurs. It was also important that we provide alternative responses to police responses. Our police department here is very, very busy, and the busier we get, the longer the response times are. And so whenever possible, we want to free up the resources and provide more appropriate, specific responses. Other goals were to make businesses and residents feel connected and supported. to cut down the wait time for responses, and also provide similar supports and make the unhoused and vulnerable citizens on the streets also feel supported and connected. Chair, the plan provided for three parts to the approach. First of all, being a tiered approach, and the idea being that we would find layers of personnel who are trained and can be mobilized to deal with specific issues, starting with things as simple as volunteer ambassadors or private security patrols, but also to create a new tier of responses, community safety officers, which I'll speak on in detail. Then lastly, when to appropriately engage the police, and how to create networks so that all these groups can communicate with one another so that we would leave no issues unaddressed. The second part of the plan was to deal with the management of public spaces and assets. And that means the measures that are necessary to keep public spaces and infrastructure not only clean but safe and accessible to everybody. And lastly, the plan was to provide a system of governance, understanding that this plan will not be static. It'll evolve as the conditions change downtown. And these systems require monitoring of progress so we can address the changes and determine what necessary changes are needed, such as coordinating to the systems planning organization, which will be starting next month, working with the situation tables, which Ms. Wood is now convening, and also communicating with the BIAs and other downtown stakeholders. So starting, I want to spend the most time talking about the community safety officer team that we created. This is one of the key recommendations. These are 12 officers that have substantially the same status and legal authority of bylaw officers. By design, though, they're very distinct in their role, and by the training that we provided them, and by the hours of work that they now do. Really pleased with the group of officers that we've hired. They have a very diverse background, not only in enforcement, but also in various social services and clinical outreach, which provides a great diversity of perspective. The things that make the CSOs very unique is that they're doing proactive foot and bike patrols for 19 and a half hours a day, 7 days a week. So from 6 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. daily. And I can tell you that of all the resources that are either enforcement or outreach downtown, this is the most consistent group that you'll see on the street at any time. And these folks are trying to support three different groups. First of all, they're here to support downtown residents and businesses. They respond to the disturbances, the public disorders, and they solve problems at the lowest possible levels. They're all trained to de-escalate conflict and minimize the necessity for police interventions. One of the key goals of this team is that we wanted a target to provide responses within 30 minutes of calls. The police response times are often, if it is an emergency, up to several hours depending on the availability of officers. And we were really trying to cut that down. The community safety officers are also there to support unsheltered citizens. Some of the work that the officers have been doing is to provide points of entry for engagement to the services in town. Things like wayfinding people to shelters and to the warming centers, to the shower programs and overdose prevention sites. Many of the people that are unsheltered on our streets are itinerant, and wayfinding is very, very significant. One thing that was unexpected, but that the CSOs have really been contributing to, is staffing the overnight extreme weather shelters and warming centers. This wasn't a role that we expected, but with the really inclement weather this winter, the officers often worked 8 and 10 hours of extra shift after their 10-hour day shifts to make sure that these centers were staffed and available to operate. When they're not in the warming centers, they often compile gatherings of clothing and blankets that they distribute out in the street. Most recently, with the startup of the situation table, which Ms. Wood is going to talk about, they also actively participate in the situation tables. And the last group that they support is the health and outreach services that work with all these unsheltered populations. Chair, I can tell you that the community safety officer team commenced on October 1st, so they've been out for about 5 months now. And in those 5 months, they've responded to 3,465 unique calls. This includes things like response to encampments, and some of the earliest work that the officers did was to resolve the recurring fires in Bowen Park. The committee may recall that we had, I think, 6 significant fires in Bowen Park at that time, and one of the first tasks we did was deploy these officers to determine what the sources were and mitigate those impacts. The CSOs also do frequent wellness checks, and one thing that they're very busy with is doing frequent life-saving interventions, administering naloxone and CPR. And I can tell the committee that they've saved many, many lives in the first 5 months. They respond to businesses, and they are very key in protecting a lot of our city assets, our parkades, our plazas, and our parks. And as I said from the onset, it has to be understood that these measures don't address the root causes of homelessness, but they do provide timely and consistent responses and supports to the community. And most significantly, many of these supports occur after business hours, after 4 and 5 p.m. when traditional municipal services previously didn't operate. Turning quickly to public spaces and assets, the plan included programs to keep public spaces and infrastructure clean. Back in 2019, the city piloted a clean team project that was incrementally funded and provided 2 sanitation workers in a truck that used to shadow the bylaw officers to focus on downtown cleanliness. These are the folks that would manage accumulations of garbage and deal with the issues of filth and human waste on the streets and sidewalks. And every day they would do morning sweeps with our officers to clear the streets before businesses open. We were very, very pleased to get the funding to make the clean team permanent, and not 1 but 2 full-time clean teams, now providing 7-day-a-week coverage. Not only does it provide these 2 teams, but also there are 2 custom trucks on order. These trucks will be designed to include onboard pressure washers and generators that will be more efficiently be able to address the sanitation issues that we experience downtown. Additionally, they've ordered 2 industrial waste garbage vacuums that are, I'm told, more efficient than sweepers, and they can clean things even like human waste on the streets and even work on the grass. And then the last piece that is now rolling off is that our sanitation department are placing strategic roll-off bins in different areas downtown and adding numerous new garbage receptacles just to try and keep the downtown area cleaner. Another important aspect of the protecting public and private assets was the commencement of a vandalism relief grant. And the idea behind this grant was to provide downtown property owners with quick assistance to repair damage incurred by vandalism, break-in, or graffiti. This grant was funded $50,000 in the first year, with $30,000 in successive years over 5 years. And I can advise you, Chair, that we entered a service agreement with the Chamber of Commerce on October 1st of 2022, and we now have the system in place to provide for funding of up to $1,000 per incident to a maximum of 2 claims a calendar year per property owner. And I'm told in the first 3 months of the last 3 months of 2022, the grant program dispersed a total of $8,805 to cover costs from 12 different incidents. Mr. Chair, can advise the committee that the city also manages 3 parkade facilities downtown, which have a total of 901 parking stalls. This parking infrastructure support many of our key amenities downtown, including the conference center, the theater, and the casino, hotels, businesses, and many of the island residents. As many of you probably realize, parking facilities are always susceptible to crime because they're large permeable spaces, and they have a lot of high-value assets and have a lot of low activity levels, particularly during the nighttime hours. So we've had a lot of challenges in our parkades, incidents of fire, of thefts, and damage to not only vehicles but to our infrastructure. So we had a security assessment done in the fall of 2022 to get recommendations to reduce the vulnerabilities in these facilities. And I'm pleased to advise the committee that in the summer of this year, we have investment to install about $255,000 of CCTV infrastructure into the Port of Nanaimo and Harbourfront parkades, and further measures to improve securement of our electrical and HVAC systems, and to do some elevator upgrades. The consultant's report identified other investments that are needed, and one thing that staff is talking about, and we hope to bring back to the committee and the council in the future, is a possibility of an operational command center that would provide real-time camera monitoring and event-based responses to intrusions and other types of the threats that not only occur to our parkades but our other high-value city assets, whether it would be a water treatment plant or turf fields or recreation facilities. Some of the other things that we're looking at in the parkades with the opening of the new hotel is an access control system, which would include entrance gating to secure the facilities for the overnight parkers, and to increase a more rigorous maintenance program, which would provide additional pressure washing, painting, and even surface membranes in the stairwells of these facilities. Chair, I'm really mindful of our time here, and there are more details of the plan included in the staff report. And I know Ms. Wood has a lot of discussion on the mid and upstream initiatives that staff are working on, so maybe I'll stop at this point and answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaBerge. I see a couple of questions on my screen, starting with Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. LaBerge. Doing garbage cleanup in the community down around the area between Albert and Kennedy and Pine Street, there was a lot of garbage bags that were hauled into that area to be ripped open and searched through for whatever might be of value, identification, things that people could use for identity theft, food, any kind of resources. And I'm wondering if there's some kind of messaging we could have, just talking to the neighborhood in that area, talking to some of the neighbors, they were suggesting that people put their garbage out morning of collection rather than night before, because this has been a pattern that's happened in their neighborhood quite a bit. And I talked to some of the other clean teams around town who would pick up garbage and leave it on the side of the road, and they were saying that if they didn't have it arranged for pickup, again, it would just be torn open in a matter of time, especially if it's left there overnight. So I'm just wondering if that's something that has been considered. And the other thing I have questions about is there was a recent shooting in a homeless camp, and part of the narrative that came out of that action by residents and a business owner was that the police weren't responding to property theft in the community. And I think it's a very dangerous narrative to see on social media and to hear in the community. And I'm just wondering about whether we have statistics around the response for RCMP for these kind of situations, and a way to reassure the community that the police are here to deal with property theft and other issues around crime that affects people.
Through the chair to Councillor Manley, thank you. A lot of really good points. Starting with the garbage issue in some of the outlying residential neighborhoods, Mr. Sims might be able to elaborate a bit more, but I understand that there are programs for media initiative around putting garbage out on the morning of garbage collection days. Moreover, because of the increasing issue of bears that are coming into the community, and I know that work is already underway, and one of the requests of Public Works and the Sanitation Department was some additional patrols by my bylaw enforcement unit on the evenings prior to make sure that residents aren't putting their garbage out prematurely. So I think that you will see some of that forthcoming later this spring. I think the second part of that is, I know there are a number of community groups that do collection of garbage and clean up some of the public areas. And it's just how important it is to communicate with our sanitation department. When they are aware of these types of initiatives, they'll often bring the rollout bins, and so it can be collected and removed before it's scavenged and spread again. So two really important points. To the last question about police response to homeless camps, I can inform the committee that the community's safety officers and the bylaw officers are routinely and regularly going through many of all the known encampments, particularly in residential areas and around the downtown core, and that they're accompanied weekly and with great regularity with the police. So I can advise that the police are in fact very much active in participating in the monitoring of what's occurring in these encampments.
And retrieving stolen goods from when people are reporting?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think it's important to understand that there are a lot of accumulated items in some of these camps, and a lot of it is just scavenged, discarded items, and it's very hard for everybody to discern what is, a discarded item and what's, an item of value that's possibly stolen, and, it's hard for enforcement to always make those determinations with precision, whether it's somebody's property, and I suspect that's where some of the frustrations are arising from the community.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I can just confirm a few of the things that Mr. LeBerge has said in response to Councillor Manley's question, is that part of our messaging in sanitation is do not put your garbage out before the morning of. And so that's been consistent, but it's a really good point to maybe put some more focus on that. Just the identity theft is an interesting angle. So thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Hemmons and Geselbrock. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the work that the CSOs are doing. I know this is supposed to be on downtown safety, but I have some similar concerns as to what Mr. Manley said, even though they're not. It goes to my point of why we need more than just a downtown safety action plan. Is the last 3 shootings, well, one happened here, the other 2 weren't even in this part of town. So when they were doing their review, did they look at having personnel man like the security gates like they do in the cities now? Because that gives you a better sense of security when somebody's actually at the gate, pushing the button, letting you in, taking your payment when you leave. Has that been explored?
Through the chair, just to clarify, you're talking about the parkade facilities having
City-owned
parking
parkades,
attendants? Yes, I think there were a total of about 28 unique recommendations, and one of the suggestions was the possibility of having gate attendants. I think the challenge that we realize, though, is that these parkades by design are very permeable, and there are many points of entrances other than the vehicle gates, and that just having somebody in a booth at the vehicle entrances isn't very strategic in determining what's happening in the rest of the facilities. And they were suggesting more to use CCTV systems that have alarms that would send real-time alerts to patrolling officers that could go and investigate. And they thought that would probably be more cost-effective than having on-site personnel, because we already have security in the facilities most of the nighttime hours.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one more thing about police response, because I saw it made the news again Friday night about lack of response here. But I think what people have to remember is that when police go into these areas, they need warrants, because tents are considered their homes. So they have to have a warrant, and in order to get that property, the property owners need to have identifying marks such as serial numbers or like distinct markings, whatever. And in a lot of these cases, they don't. So the police's hands are tied. I know people don't want to hear that, but that's the actual truth of the matter, that police have to conform to the laws of this country, and a lot of times the laws don't help them. So I understand the frustration people feel when they know their property's in there, but when you go to a police officer and say, I know my property's there, well, what's your serial numbers? Can you identify it? And they can't. Well, I'm sorry, but their hands are tied. Not something any of us like to hear, but it's the truth, because if they were to do anything, then there'd be complaints against them and they would be founded. So I think we have to be really cognizant of what the police can and cannot do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. A series of questions related to this report. You can interrupt me if you'd like. First is, how do people contact the CSOs?
Through the chair, during business hours, they can call the bylaw department and they can dispatch the CSO strategically. After hours, it's a call through the Public Works Department and the commissioners that work through the night. And the CSOs also carry duty phones, and most of the really large stakeholders downtown have that number, can call them directly as needed.
Okay, thank you. And just to round that out, I've been hearing from businesses and folks downtown that they're very reachable and visible, so I really appreciate that. The table in your report shows that we're seeing a trend in CSOs going into encampments. Trend downwards from October to February. Do we have any idea why that might be?
Through the chair, that's a really good question, and I was trying to pull up some maps to provide with the committee, and I really couldn't figure out the trends myself, and I thought they might create more confusion than assistance. Just safe to say that the number of encampments doesn't really determine how many persons are occupying them and how many of them are ranging outside of the area, the patrol area of the CSOs. After a long weekend, when the officers haven't been working for a few days, it's not uncommon to find encampments that grow to 20 or 30 individuals. And so the context is ever evolving, and just the sheer number of camps isn't necessarily determinative of what they're responding to.
Thank you for that. Two quick ones, if I may. Are we keeping statistics on naloxone administration?
Through the chair, I don't think that we have a specific statistic that we're tracking for administering of naloxone, but I'm told that it's multiple times a week now, and as many as 3 to 6 to 8 units on any incident. It does seem to be on the rise recently.
Thank you. I wonder if Island Health might be an interesting organization to ask as to whether what stats should be kept and where they should go in terms for them to be the most helpful. If we are administering naloxone several times a week, I think that's something that we should be talking about and reporting. Lastly, I just want to check on the welfare and the well-being of our CSOs, acknowledging that they're working in a really difficult environment and we're seeing some challenges with our first responders and their well-being. How are our CSOs doing?
Well, through the chair, I do appreciate the inquiry. One thing I want to emphasize is that there's 12 officers providing coverage 7 days a week over 19.5 hours a day, so they are thinly spread. And with just one illness or one person away, sometimes we have officers that are working alone. So I do see already some of the fatigue and strain on them, but very good support, not only within the unit, but from the broader community, and that certainly is encouraging. But I would say over the long term that it's a very fulsome mission, and it is going to bring challenges as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Burge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Geselbrecht.
Thanks, Chair. My question was on the lines of Councillor Hemmons there, just on how the CSOs were faring, and I'm just curious, having run the program now for 3, 4 months, 5 months, has there been anything that has been outside of what was expected that we're seeing, or the time spent at the CSOs more spent in one area as opposed to another in terms of their duties?
Through the chair, that's a really good question, and I think one of the things we really emphasized was that we wanted them to have a relationship and be respectful of people that are living on the street, and really the CSOs have exceeded that. They know this population very well, and one of the things that we found is that there are so few resources on the streets after hours that the presence of these officers in remote areas and in parks and in different areas downtown actually brings a real measure of safety to these folks. they tend to be victimized a great deal. And, you know, a lot of the work that the CSOs are doing are working with the police to identify who the predatory people are on the streets, and so enforcement can focus on them and reduce the victimization among the street folks.
Great, thank you. And just to follow up on that, like in terms of sustainability of the program and need, like, are we maxed out in the capacity of what's being demanded from the current crew that's there, or is it pretty well managed, or where do we sit on that in terms of sustainability?
Through the chair, you know, that's a good question. I mean, like any first responders, I mean, our fire department, our police officers are just fully taxed and so busy in every shift, and the CSOs are just an extension of that. And I think really the best we can hope for is to pace them and check in on their wellness. I think we could double the size of the unit and keep them all very busy, but just mindful that these are downstream resources, and we're really hopeful that we can find some upstream solutions that'll lessen the demand, and that would probably suit everybody best.
And just one more on that, and I think just kind of going to what Councillor Hemmens mentioned about the naloxone and about the need for the sort of the upstream interventions, that this is not really a sustainable intervention in the first place. Are there areas that you think that we could leverage the experience of the CSOs, the data being collected, and potentially enhance our storytelling of what's being experienced down there to, increase pressure from Nanaimo on the different agencies and other levels of government in terms of, the strain that we're under, and where are the areas that we need to be focusing on to improve our provincial response?
Through the chair, I think that would be an excellent idea. The CSOs go to many public forums now and speak on their experiences. And I mean, as the committee knows, I was a police officer for 33 years and know the streets very well. And I'm just always surprised at how much more difficult things have been on the street, and the challenges that these first responders are involved in. So I think their narrative is very important. And I can certainly say that, that they've collaborated very well with Island Health and other people in the sector. So I think the word and the experience is getting out, but certainly more could be done.
Great, thank you. And just a final here, I go down Old Victoria every day to get to downtown, and usually there's a CSO on that street, and I think that the level of care that I've seen in terms of dealing with the different situations that are arising and support being provided so exceeded what my initial thoughts were of what this program was. So I just want to say good work to the folks working that job, and I know that it's probably a pretty overwhelming experience every day, just sort of seeing the magnitude of the problem. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor Perino on my Zoom tile, and then we have Councillor Eastmuir after that. Councillor? Mr. Rudolph. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Rudolph, please.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I was just going to add to this piece. One of the thoughts that we've been talking about at the SLT table is maybe having a one-year audit done on the effectiveness of the program, have Mr. Nielsen back to give sort of an impartial but knowledgeable assessment of what he's hearing, and that might inform different or additional resources that would come into budget for next year. That's one idea. We're talking a lot about CSOs, and we're very focused on the downtown, but we can't forget that the work the bylaw officers themselves are also doing, because they're still involved in this, and they are now been deployed effectively to the outlying areas, so that whereas all the attention was in the downtown and some of these hot spots, the bylaw officers are now more deployed around the city. And it's not to say that it's not all concentrated in the downtown. So that's the second piece. I think the third piece is the narrative that Ms. Wood is going to speak to about this is just managing the issue the best we can with some of the resources. It's really looking at the big picture and the work that the SPO is going to be doing, and some of the other things that the city's lending a hand to or involved in. It's quite diversified. We're going to speak to that in a few moments. And I think looking at this holistically, there's a lot to it. So as Mr. LaBerge said, the upstream piece, that is the pieces that are leading to people getting in these situations, is we're at the very end of the spectrum here in terms of people landing on the street and how to manage that and respect the interests of the businesses, the property owners, the visitors, and everybody else that has a stake in the community. I sense that there is a heavy burden, and it's increasing for the CSOs. And as they become and have become our first line in many situations, as it appears, they're there before many of the outreach workers are there, or even some of the other first responders. And so there's a reliability factor there, but it's also a stress that's happening, I think, and it's something to be mindful of. And I appreciate the questioning on that, because it's something that maybe we could have some of those folks in and talk about those experiences as well. I think it would be very informative for them to tell their story, and they're doing exceptional work, and it's really quite an impressive team. But I will also give a plug for the bylaw officers as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph. And I was going to, at some point, put Mr. LaBerge politically on the spot and ask his assessment of the program, but I think after 5 months, we've already seen that it's brought a lot of benefit to our citizens, both housed and unhoused. But I do look forward to the one-year audit and a further discussion and hear the experiences of the people directly involved. Now, we'll go to Councillor Perino first, I think I said, and then Councillor Eastmere after that. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to Mr. LaBerge for the incredible work that he's doing with his teams. And, you just, it's inspiring to hear what is being done. And I think something that Mr. Rudolph said about the bylaw officers also in the other areas of town, the question that I was going to ask Mr. LaBerge is, should we be putting more of our community safety officers in the other areas besides downtown, because we know there are other hotspots. Even after this 5 months, is it time to increase the program, is my question to him, as much as I hate the thought.
Through the chair to Councillor Perino, really good points. To Mr. Rudolph's comments, the bylaw officers do continue to do all the work with unhoused citizens outside of the downtown core, and it is considerable. And one thing that's coming in April is another point in time count. I think it'll be coming in at the end of the month, and I think that'll be kind of a good litmus test just on what the extent of homelessness is in the community. We haven't had one since the spring of 2020. But to your point, I think the more that we have community safety officers that are specialized and focus exclusively on homelessness, the more that we're able to keep our bylaw officers deployed in doing all their other duties with all the other regulatory bylaws that the city has, because invariably everything from park control to building matters and zoning matters are often slow or unresolved if they're busy dealing with these types of matters.
Well, thank you for what you do. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Eastmere, and then Councillor Armstrong. Sorry, I think I reversed you there. There we go. And then if there's no other questions, I'd like to move on. Mr. Rudolph, your hand is still up, but that's an old one, I assume. Thank you. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Through you, if I could ask you, you said, you mentioned there being so few resources on the streets after hours. Can you just elaborate on what you mean by that?
Through the chair to Councillor Eastmere, there aren't many type of outreach resources after 4 or 5 p.m. Some of the health outreach teams work as late as 9 o'clock in the evening, but the only resources that are really walking the beat through the areas where a lot of our unsheltered citizens are right now are the CSOs. They're going through the parks, they're going through the parkades, they're going in the areas where we know there's vulnerable citizens sheltering. We do have after-hour police resources, but they're very, very busy responding to calls through the entire community and don't necessarily have the time to focus on the issues that are in the downtown core. But you know, one of the conversations we've had with our partners in health recently is that they aren't, you know, they do have outreach teams, but they're, you know, they set up strategically and do sessions at fixed places like the overdose prevention site, but they're not walking the streets in the manner that the municipality is providing these resources.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It's, yeah, I can't imagine what that must be like for them, and part of their mandate being to help direct people to the resources that are available. But if it's, you know, nighttime and there are no resources and there are very small number of shelter beds are full, then, you know, really where can they direct people to? So I recognize that's a huge challenge, and I am concerned with our warming center contracts ending at the end of March, recognizing those are daytime spaces that people are able to access, but I think that is, we're going to see the impact of that as our unhoused population really has nowhere to go during the day for a gathering space or to warm up or use a washroom. So I think I'm concerned about that and would like to see if there's anything that we can do. As far as the hours that the CSOs are working, if there was more staff capacity on the CSO side, do you think that it would be more valuable to have them working in that gap where there is currently no CSOs on the street between that 1:30 and 6:30 a.m. space? Because I feel like with the program having been run for 5 months now, people must know that that's sort of the hours when no one is watching. Do you think that there could be a need to expand the program so that CSOs are working during that time?
Through the chair, that's a very good question, and I think there's a need for services throughout the night hours. Some of our community partners have suggested that we should emphasize on night hours more than daytime hours when there are other services. But on the other hand, you know, during the very early hours, you know, a lot of people are settled in and sleeping through the night. So, you know, I think we try to be strategic in the hours in when people are up and moving and need this type of wayfinding. If we had another dozen CSOs, would we consider going through the night? Quite likely we would.
Could we potentially run into issues with the union not allowing people to work during those hours? Is that a consideration that we've run up against?
Well, through the chair, that was previously with the bylaw officers because the agreement was for daytime hours, but when we created the CSO program, we actually reached an agreement with the union to provide coverage 24 hours a day, dependent on the capacity that we had.
Okay, and I have been talking to downtown business owners, and like I admit I was skeptical of the downtown safety action plan when it came forward. I didn't know if it was going to be a helpful thing, and I of course would hope for those upstream solutions first, but just recognizing how valuable the program has been and how supported the downtown business owners feel, at least having someone that they can call, and that it has been really helpful. But running up against the issue of the frequency of calls to the CSOs for people who are, you know, loitering in Diana Krall Plaza, and some people expressing that it would be nice if there was some kind of like anti-loitering bylaws or something that would give them a little bit more to work with in that area. And, you know, unfortunately, I think we would all love Diana Krall Plaza to be a place where we encourage like community loitering, because that's really supposed to be the ultimate goal of that space. People can come and hang out, but I think unfortunately what we're seeing right now is people feel unsafe like going to the library because oftentimes it is a sort of a gathering place for our unhoused members who have nowhere else to go. So I'm just wondering, like, if you have feedback on how, like, would having some kind of regulations around the use of that space help our CSOs at this point? Is that something that they're running up against?
Through the chair, vagrancy laws were repealed in Canada in the 1970s, about 10 years before the Charter of Rights came in. People can assemble in any public space as they choose. You know, we tend to focus on behaviors that are obstructive. So if people pile up big accumulations of belongings or obstruct a sidewalk or the entrance, say around the tuning forks in the Dannerqual Plaza, we would address that because people can't safely and freely access types of areas. Aside from that, we don't interfere with where people want to assemble. You know, the question of people that have shopping carts or in front of a business and have nowhere to go, it's usually just an encouragement to use warming spaces and facilities, you know, where it'd be less disruptive to them with other types of traffic. And with areas like Dannerqual Plaza, which is a natural gathering space, that's what it was intended for. We always say that busy streets are safe streets, and if the more programming that we can get in to have good positive use in keeping those areas busy is the best way to address those types of challenges.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I don't know if we can wait for a one-year audit. Like, it just, given the big numbers that we're seeing come out of this program, I think it might warrant like a 6-month or an 8-month, just like as soon as we can take an overview of it. Thank you.
And Councillor Armstrong. There we go.
Thank you. Actually, my question is for either Superintendent Fletcher or Inspector Burton. I see them sitting there. We didn't comment, excuse me, on has this freed up the police resources to a degree. That was one of the reasons many of us voted for it. Would you be prepared to speak to that today, or could you do that at a later date?
Good afternoon, through your chair to Councillor Armstrong. We have seen the strong connection between the community safety officers, the bylaw officers, and the police. And I will say that it has changed our focus in terms of the downtown, knowing that the community safety officers are readily accessible. We're doing a lot of our policing at this point is still reactive.
But it has given you opportunity to go to different parts of town
Yes,
that were
very
being.
much so.
Thank you. Appreciate your willingness to speak to that.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thanks, Councillor Armstrong. We could spend all afternoon, I'm sure, dealing further with this topic, but we have a related topic which I want to get to. I would just like to comment that, first of all, you answered a question that I was going to ask Mr. LaBerge regarding the parkades, and that is the feasibility of gating and other types of surveillance, so thank you for that. At least we're looking at it. I need to comment that as I drove into the parkade to park for this meeting, I noticed just outside, adjacent to the conference center, there was an unsheltered person in obvious distress, and with them were 2 community safety officers and a bylaw person. One person was speaking with the unsheltered person, offering words of comfort. I went over and spoke to them. The other community safety officer was actually tying the shoelaces of the unsheltered person. And the third staff involved, the bylaw officer, was on the phone trying to contact an outreach worker to put in touch with this person. So I was extremely impressed with the compassion that was being shown and the genuine concern for this unsheltered person who needed help. So thanks again to the work that's being done.
That's a great story. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So on to our next related topic. And Mr. Lindsay, were you going to introduce the broader sense of community safety and security?
Yeah, just very briefly, thank you through the chair. I'll turn it over here to Ms. Wood. And as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, the intent of this report is to give council and I think the broader community an understanding of all the different programs and initiatives that council supported and give you an update on each, and happy to take questions, but I'll turn it over to Ms. Wood.
And before Ms. Wood gets started, I want to offer an abject apology because earlier in the meeting, I think I referred to you as Ms. Clark, thinking, I suppose, of Christy Clark. I heard the mayor gasp in horror. So I want to make it clear that it was Ms. Wood. And welcome, and please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Through the chair to the committee, as Mr. Lindsay said, I'm here to provide an update of city initiatives and programs that work to address community safety and security. I think when we think of community safety and security, most of our thoughts automatically go to our visible, responses. So the good work of our police, our bylaw, and our fire departments. But less visible, the city has a really important impact on some of the work that we do with the root causes of crime and social disorder. For instance, sometimes through our built environment, we can improve safety, or provision of community amenities like parks, and programs and initiatives that support social development, recreation, culture, and wellness. And I just want to make a note that we tried to cover as much as we can, but I do want to note that there is staff, for instance, in our public works team that is dealing directly with social disorder and the work that they do around vandalism prevention and all that work. But this is just high level and just really focused on more of the crime and social disorder. Council will see that the report is structured under 3 categories. So we have the downstream, midstream, and upstream. And the purpose of this category is just to really give an idea of the different types of impact that downstream, midstream, and upstream programs have on community safety and initiative. So I'm just going to provide a brief overview for the sake of time. I know it's a deep topic, and we do have a team of staff here that are able to answer questions if there's any other questions. So to start, I'm going to talk about the downstream. So we started there, so figure we should continue on that. So downstream approaches are just like what we talked about, our immediate responses to urgent incidents that we see happening in the community. We try to minimize victimization where possible, and we work to provide that accountability. So that's the downstream. So reflected in our bylaw section, our Nanaimo Fire Rescue, and our police services. Some of the other downstream work that we do is also in response to homelessness. So as the committee knows, we received funding through our Strengthening Communities and Services program for 2 years. So in 2021, we received $2.5 million in round 1, and in 2022, we received $625,000. So round 1 funds are being distributed by staff to support a bunch of different initiatives, but some of the funds went to support the shower program, the expansion of additional downtown cleanup and security services like our Community Connect that we did in the Old City Quarter. Also provided portable toilets in key locations. Round 2 funds are currently supporting a morning meal program, extreme cold and general daytime warming services, and outreach services for our Sinemook members experiencing homelessness, just to get basic needs and cultural supports. So as an example, community partners such as Risebridge and the 710 are supporting an average of between 55 to 60 individuals daily with warming services. The Unitarian is providing extreme colder weather services for shelter guests. They're seeing during January, December, and February during our extreme weather events, they supported an average of 18 individuals daily to stay inside, so they didn't have to leave the shelter. And finally, under the same programming, the Salvation Army is providing, between November and the end of January, they provided 6,206 breakfast meals. Through the collaborative work with the city's community development, emergency management, parks, recreation, and culture, bylaw, and fire departments, along with community partners, the city was able to provide supports and services to individuals experiencing homeless during our extreme cold weather events, one that we had in December and January and February. So the city worked with 710 and Risebridge to expand their hours. So 710 was able to open in the evening, and Risebridge was able to open overnight. And these were additional efforts in addition to the city staff providing a warming center in December up at the Bevan Social Center, as well as having, as Mr. LaBerge talked about, as well as having our community safety officers provide additional hours of outreach during these events. So the city staff were able to coordinate and distribute just over $332,000 from the Strengthening Communities program, as well as access funds from the Emergency Management Climate Readiness to provide the winter's response. In 2018, the city started funding a shower program in partnership with the Unitarian in response to the limited shower services that were available at that time in the city. Currently, the shower program runs 5 days per week, Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. Down at Caledonia Park. It's important to note that the shower program also serves as a focal point for individuals who are experiencing homeless to access other services. So other service providers go down, provide wound care, basic needs, clothing, and access to medical care as well. The city's providing the facility and custodian staffs to support, and in addition to the 2023 budget allocation of $69,800. So since 2018, since the city's provided that, we've provided just over $206,000 since the program was established. Another downstream program is between 2017 and 2022, the city provided just over $246,000 to fund an urban cleanup program. And the program, again, was developed in a response to social issues and downtown concerns around garbage and discarded needles and some of the social disorder. And in addition, so the city actually funded the John Howard Society to provide this program. In addition, John Howard used the program as an employment skill-based program for folks that were transitioning at a correctional facility or even out of homelessness. So the program actually ended in 2022, at the end of 2022, at the request of the operator, just because there were other employment opportunities for their clients to explore, and they were finding that the increase of volume of debris was a little bit too much for their small crew to handle. Right now, currently, the staff are updating the Surviving in Nanaimo guide. It's a resource guide that lists resources and community services about low cost or free services in the community. It also includes some city information like, I think we were talking about public washrooms earlier, all the public washrooms that are actually open and the hours that they're available for anybody to use. The guide is also really well used by social service agencies, so the city provides an online version, but they also provide a print version, and we update it. We update the online version quite regularly when we get updates, but every year we do an annual print as well. Mr. LaBerge talked about the Downtown Nanaimo Community Safety Action Plan. I'm not going to touch on it, but I think it's really important to note it as one of our downstream initiatives and the considerable investment that the city's made to respond to the ongoing challenges in the downtown core. Nanaimo Fire Rescue here plays a key role in responding to issues of community safety and security. Chief Doyle let me know that last year they responded to nearly 10,000 incidences, including fires, hazardous material emergencies, technical rescues, vehicle accidents, medical calls, and that includes medical emergencies related to the toxic drug crisis. And he let me know about the good work about how they're collaborating with the BC Centre for Disease Control as one of the first fire departments to participate in the Take Home Naloxone kit program. So I think, we were talking about, how do we, monitor the stats and that. So that might be, that's another program for the committee to be aware of. And the city just recently expanded the Nanaimo Fire Rescue services by adding 40 new firefighters, so 20 to be hired this year and then 20 in 2025. The other thing that the committee has made significant investments in policing. So in 2022, council supported the addition of 4 downtown safety enforcement officers to the tune of $488,000. And these officers are foot patrols meant to support the downtown safety issues. And in addition to these 4 officers, council approved the addition of 15 RCMP officers, 3 starting in each year starting 2020. And it's also important to note that these are additional enhancements to the existing RCMP Bike Patrol unit, which specializes in dealing with homelessness and social disorder, and they're really good about connecting regularly with social service providers to help bridge some of those gaps as well. Midstream. So midstream approaches to community safety and security more incorporate risk and what I would call risk intervention strategies. So they're targeted. So they target typically a group that tends to be higher risk. They work to respond acutely to what we call elevated risk situations to mitigate harm and decrease where we can the likelihood of victimization or trauma. So a good example of this, which I'll touch on a little bit later, is the newly formed situation table. But also want to make note of the work that the City Parks, Recreation and Culture Department is doing in partnership with Island Health to support youth at risk with the Wellness Center that's happening at the Nanaimo Aquatic Center. So the Health and Housing Action Plan is a midstream approach that's providing a 5-year roadmap to support the needs of those at risk or are facing vulnerable circumstances to meet their health and housing needs. Preventing homelessness reduces the likelihood of an individual or family being victimized or being involved in crime. And as you know, one of the actions out of the Health and Housing Action Plan, which we've talked about previously, is a systems planning organization, and how council is contributing $500,000 over 5 years in order to ensure that that strategic direction is being taken around coordination, accurate data collection, research, and education. The other one is the Community Policing Program, and that's a funded program delivered in partnership with the RCMP. The program provides community-based crime prevention and community policing initiatives. So programs offered, which the committee would be well aware of, would be the Neighborhood Safety Audit, Crime Watch, Speed Watch. They do bike registration for theft prevention and other safety campaigns. In 2023, the city provided just over $129,000 for that community policing program. In addition to what I mentioned in the downstream initiatives and programs, the Strengthening Communities program is also funding through round 1, 12 studio housing units and 6 scattered site housing units in partnership with Snuneymuxw First Nation. That funding is also helping with staffing capacity and management of those units as well. And round 2 is funding the lease of a second vehicle, just as another example for the community policing program to provide additional crime watch in city neighborhoods. And that will be happening until the end of August 2023. So in January of this year, Nanaimo launched its situation table in partnership with the provincial government. We received a $30,000 grant to provide the training for the table participants. So a situation table is a proactive hub that brings frontline staff or their direct supervisors to the table so they can respond quickly and effectively to a high-risk situation it could be for an individual, it could be for a family or a circumstance. And these high-risk situations usually involve risk around victimization, it could be overdose, eviction, offending behavior, or others that without that immediate intervention could lead to a negative, traumatic, or even life-threatening circumstances. And the idea of the situation table is that support services are offered by a team to the individual or family within 24 to 48 hours. And so that not only improves the life and reduces the risk for the individual or family, but it also provides a level of protection to the community because it helps to deal with the individuals that draw heavily on multiple resources like our police officers. And upstream. So upstream approaches are really about reducing our need for the downstream, midstream approaches, ideally. It's about creating communities where everyone has equal opportunity to grow, work, play, be valued, have a sense of belonging. So protective factors like positive social skills, strong relationships, access to recreational activities, volunteering, or other social determinant health indicators such as housing, employment, education, all create an environment that actually reduces crime and victimization. And the city, as I mentioned, is playing an active part in that upstream work. And in addition to the programs that I'm going to touch upon today, it's important to note that these are also reflected in supportive policies and the goals outlined in city plan as well. So we know that links between community involvement in parks, recreation, and culture programs are associated with lower levels of crime and vandalism. So the city's Parks, Recreation, and Culture Division supports upstream initiatives by providing those safe gathering spaces. They provide programs and events for a whole diverse group of people, no matter your background, age, or economic status. For instance, Parks, Recreation, and Culture is offering the Leisure Economic Access Pass, which ensures families who face financial barriers can access recreation and positive development programs, not only for themselves, but for their children as well. Another example is how Parks and Rec staff are actively supporting youth and children by not only providing the opportunity to be engaged in positive programming, but they act as mentors and they act as navigators, connecting especially our youth and children at risk to other service providers in the community as well. The Affordable Housing Strategy and City Plan provides a framework for the city to facilitate the development of affordable housing. So with various levels of government, the private sector, and nonprofit agencies, the city's been able to implement a number of initiatives. For instance, establishing the MOU with BC Housing to build the supportive and affordable housing units, including the provision of city land for these projects. The city has created and implemented the short-term rental regulation to help reduce the pressures on the rental market. We've completed updates to the community amenity contribution to allow more funds to be directed to affordable housing, and in 2021 we launched our first rent bank. So, and as council, the committee is aware, staff are working on additional affordable housing initiatives, which will be presented to council later this year. So we know that affordable, adequate, and safe housing is a social determinant of health, and it provides a safe and stable environment for individuals and families and lowers the risk of becoming homeless. Another upstream program that the city supports is the social planning grant program. So it supports organizations in responding to social issues and supports programs that enhance social cohesion, address the root causes and the effects of poverty, and contributes to the vitality of our community. Annually, the city is providing $85,000 through 2 grants. So one is the social response grant, and the other one is the community vitality grant. And just last year, council adopted the Neighborhood Association Supports Policy. We talked a little bit about neighborhood associations earlier, and committed $10,000 annually through the grant program. So healthy and vibrant neighborhoods are key to community safety and security, and the neighborhood associations help relationship building between residents. They meet regularly to discuss neighborhood issues, especially safety challenges. They also create a sense of belonging and neighborhood identity by providing programming sometimes, community projects, or hosting special events. And finally, council will remember that in 2022, the city was allocated $1.8 million to develop and implement a strategic plan to prevent gun and gang violence here in Nanaimo. The purpose of the funding is really to focus on addressing root causes known to negatively influence a young person's life, and increase protective factors so youth and children are prevented from engaging in crime or violence. The strategy, which will be coming to council for endorsement next month, will be to provide a set of actions that we can implement over the next 3 years that will reduce risk, vulnerability, and harm for youth and children. So I've just provided a little snapshot of the way the city is working to address or influence the community safety. I think it's important, again, to note the 5 goals identified in the newly adopted city plan, and the actions taken to implement them will further increase community safety and security in Nanaimo. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wood. Really appreciate it. And I'll repeat what I said earlier. The city is, as we, I hope, realize, doing a lot of programs related to community safety and security, not just with the downstream effects, but also as much as we can within our remit and resources with the midstream, as you've indicated, and the proactive upstream approaches. So again, we appreciate your work, and I do have a couple of questions for you. First of all, from Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you to Ms. Wood, thank you for the presentation, and thank you also to Mr. LaBerge as well. Probably a somewhat unfair question, but the city has invested a great deal in the systems planning organization and will over the next few years. Given your current position and knowing of your past experience, what would success look like for you for the SPO at the end of, say, the first year? What do you hope and expect and would like to see come out of it? And I appreciate that's a somewhat political question, and you're sitting there amongst your peers, but quite candidly, given your experience, I would value very much your comments.
Thank you, through the chair. Wow, that's a tough question, but I can think that, as I mentioned in the upstream work, we know that the upstream work produces the most results with the best return on reducing. I think with the SPO and in relationship to my work that I'm doing, that would allow me to do more upstream work on behalf of the city. So
I was hoping for a somewhat more expansive answer, but I'll settle for what I can get. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, followed by Councillor Manley and Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you.
Armstrong.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Right now, we sit at number 28 in the country on the Crime Severity Index, which has increased. Only Abbotsford, Vancouver, and Kelowna are ahead of us. Nothing that is in this report has addressed crime, to me. It's addressed homelessness. And many of our crimes, especially our violent crimes, are not done by our homeless people. There are some, but they're few and far between. What is the city doing to address our chronic offender problems and the crimes? I would go so far as to argue your downstream initiatives, the Strengthened Community Service Program, has actually brought more crime to the communities, which we hear from in Newcastle, Nob Hill now, that since the arrival of those, like Risebridge and those others, crime has increased substantially. So how can we say that that's working when we're actually seeing our neighborhoods getting more crime? That's my first one.
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, I think you raise a really good point. I think if you look at the report, a lot of our work is done downstream, and we know, and you probably know from your past, occupation that, in order to make a difference, on real crime and violence, we have to do the upstream work. So, the gun and gang violence prevention strategy, doing more of that work will help reduce the crime severity index. But we don't do a lot of that because as a society, we generally tend to focus on the downstream crisis response, and rightfully so, in a lot of circumstances. But, even from policing, the idea is that we're always trying to invest in some time for prevention work as well. And I'm sure, perhaps Mr. Lindsay or Mr. Rudolph also have some more experience to add to that.
I would add that I totally agree that prevention has to be done, and that's where most of it comes from. But and I know our two police officers here can attest to, that's the first thing that gets cut is your prevention programs, because they don't have the bodies. I was doing research again, and I know we've given 19 more police officers, I think, in the last 5 years, but we're still 70 behind Victoria, which has a smaller population. So I think that's an issue that has to be looked at. But my concern still remains that our crime rates are going up. Our people are feeling worse. We're investing more money than we've ever invested in the homeless situation, but we're not doing any investing, in my opinion, in stuff that's affecting the taxpayers. Can you comment to that?
Mr. Chair, looks like
I don't know, we're
nobody said the questions would be easy.
well, I think the city has been a full municipal participant in the advocacy work that's going on to the provincial and federal governments. Recently, you've seen a keen interest in the city for the shootings that have taken place, and it's given an opportunity for the mayor to speak on behalf of council and the citizens about the concerns that are not only occurring here but across the province. So a lot of these issues are stem from the situation of people not being retained in some form of, if they're getting into legal trouble, that they're being released on an awful frequent basis, and this is causing a recurrence of people on the street. We hear stories of people with hundreds and hundreds of files on them. This really is a major drain on the police department. So I think tackling it at a very strategic high level is going to be effective for the city if people can be kept in situations where they're not going to be causing these recurring challenges. It's not all of the folks that are on the streets are causing the problems. It's the 5% that are causing the majority of the crime and those types of things. There's a visibility challenge, and there's a concern around that. So, so the one is whatever the minister, the provincial government ministry that's responsible for Crown, the advocacy work that they're doing with the federal government to change federal laws is going to be very helpful at a ground level for us, I think. And there's stories across the province where people are, literally let out when they shouldn't be, and they're just not capable of looking after themselves. And so the mayor can speak much better than I can on that subject matter. So I think you're taking more of the policing and that type of thing, and police are certainly here. We're not here to, we weren't prepared to give you a big public safety forum today, and we're certainly prepared to do that in the future if you wish. This was the focus on sort of the reporting out of things, but this opens up the door, this report, on some of the other things. I think one of the things that we've been failing to do is tell our story about the things that we are attempting to do with our resources, and Ms. Wood has been very deliberate in trying to tell our story better. So it's not solving the problem, we're just part of the solution. And I think council's looking for others to contribute to it. We have the federal funding coming into the city, working there, the SPO, all these things. And one of the things we do is facilitate a lot of work. You can tell that with the work that was just outlined. I think the SPO will be another angle at helping to facilitate some of the teams that are out there. But throwing more resources at a problem that's challenging is not necessarily the right answer either. So I think we just want to be really effective with what we're doing. And I'm not sure I can answer your question. There's a lot of senior government island health components to the question.
Thank you. I guess I am very cynical. Like, I mean, the Nanaimo Situation Table, we had that for years. It just was called STAR back in the day. And I know Mr. LeBerge was part of it, so was I. The SPO, those are being done in other communities for years. And I think what, for me, is missing from this report, and it's very important to me that it needs to get in here, is that we never talk about the advocacy that we're doing. And I know that our mayor has done more advocacy than I bet any other mayor. And if you're to look at this report, we don't see any of that in there. We don't see what he's doing to talk about the chronic offenders who actually, a lot of them aren't homeless. Like, to me, this is solely focusing on homelessness, which is, to me, just a small, small part of it. And I don't believe many of our homeless people are responsible for our major crimes. Yes, they're responsible for some of our vandalism, absolutely no doubt, or minor thefts, but they're not responsible for a lot of our major crimes. I'm concerned, too, that we're not talking about the fact that we are pushing the courts for chronic offender management, or better, I'm concerned that we're not talking about the fact that we recognize that some of these people, as our mayor has said time and time again, must be in secure, complex care. Because when I read this, it's, to me, these are just motherhood statements that I've been reading about, and no offense to you, because I understand that, you know, you're just doing a general thing. I've been reading about these since the 80s. Nothing has changed for me, and I'm very cynical, and I admit that because of, you know, my previous occupation. And I also saw what this city did under, back in, I believe it was 2008, Mr. LeBerge, please correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe before that, maybe 2004, when we did have a huge significant difference and our crime rates dropped significantly and our downtown was much safer. So I would like to see some of the stuff that was done back then be brought back. So I'll just let it go, because I can go on this forever and ever, since it's something I know about and passionate about. But I really am concerned that we haven't talked about, and I hear this from the people all the time, what are you doing? Like, yeah, we've done this, but people know this. They don't know how many letters have been sent. You know, the fact that Councillor Hemmons spoke on our behalf to Island Health about the issues we were seeing with lack of brain-informed trauma, you know, stuff. Like we're not hitting on, to me, some of what the core stuff is that needs to happen, that we've actually been doing. And if you read this, people don't realize all the work that's been done with Island Health. The constant, like, again, 2 more interviews tomorrow the mayor has, you know, like, where are we capturing that so people can see? Because I hear all the time, you know, Mayor Krogh is absent, when actually he's probably at the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong, and I'll say that I appreciate your comments, and I, on the whole, agree with them. I think, though, as Mr. Rudolph has pointed out, there is a much larger, broader conversation to be had here, and that's something that I think would be worth pursuing at a future meeting or forum. So yes, I agree with what you're saying. And certainly I agree the mayor has been a strong advocate and shown real leadership in this regard. But I'd like to pull us back to Ms. Wood's report, if I may, and I have 3 speakers currently on my list. So if we could focus on the contents of the report with direct questions, I'd appreciate that. And if speakers could come through the chair as well, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you.
Thank you.
I don't disagree with some of the things that have been said. I do know that a lot of the mayhem that's caused in this community is from people who do have homes. I'm curious about the situation table. It's kind of like a micro version of the navigation center that we're long hoped for in this community. It's a way of bringing together all the different organizations. Are we having success with that in terms of getting people the services and help that they need?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Manley. It's a little bit different than what's going to be happening around the navigation center. It's also a little bit different than what we know about coordinated access as well, which I'm sure you're aware of, that work's going on in the community. So it will, of course, deal with individuals who are experiencing homelessness, but it's meant to serve the whole community. So we're talking about youth, we're talking about families, we're talking about a senior, maybe somebody who is having some challenges around mental health. So I think we have a whole, we have, I think, just over 24 service organizations that are at the table. So we have RCMP, we have MCFD, we have Qualip Lalem, we have Sinemoc there. We have a variety of different departments of Island Health at the table. We have community corrections there, so probation, so a whole host. And it may serve people who are experiencing homelessness, but you have to remember it's an intervention table. So what we're trying to do is that we're trying to reduce that risk of eviction, or we're trying to reduce that risk of victimization. So since we've launched, we've had a few situations come to the table. And what I've been noticing a little bit as a trend is that when the situation comes to the table, a lot of the organizations know them. They've offered them service, but maybe that's a couple of years ago and they haven't gone back. So this table actually helps to bring folks together, keep a follow-up almost, right? Because what happens is that when a situation's brought to the table, a lead agency is identified. It doesn't mean they're doing most of the work, but they're identified, and then other support agencies are there. And they make a plan right at that meeting, right when we wrap up. They have the room for privacy, and they make a plan about how they're gonna offer those support services as soon as possible. Sometimes that's, if appropriate, showing up to the family home, or sometimes if one of the agencies already have a relationship with that person, calling them and setting up an appointment where they're all offering those support services. We've had a few instances where people are actually saying, bring me to the situation table. I want that help. So I think there'll be some overlap, and try to avoid duplication. We're trying to figure out how we can link up with coordinated access and the situation table. There's also, I don't remember the official term, maybe Councillor Armstrong knows, but there's a unit around domestic violence. So how are we connecting them as well? Because those situations may come to the situation table and providing that linkage. So we're all working in synergy and not duplicating that, so.
You also mentioned integrated coordinated action, which I think is a very important piece that's happening in this community with HIFIS, so that people don't have to retell their same story over and over again to different agencies, and that information is shared between organizations through a computer networking system. And I think it's a really good innovation in terms of ensuring that different agencies and the police and the city are able to tap in and help people correctly without re-traumatizing them by having them repeat information that they've had to tell over and over again. So thank you for that. I don't know if you want to add anything else about the ICA program, the coordinated access. The city's connected in on that as well, right?
Through the chair, we've been connected with the folks that are kind of trying to develop the coordinated access. So there's been some consultants that are doing the coordinated action work.
It's connected to the SPO though, like that?
Yeah, there's definitely linkages that have to happen there, and will be happening. I know that they're talking about it, the consultants who are hired to do the coordinated access. I'm just trying to make sure that there's connection and synergy with the situation table. The second thing that's coming out of the situation table, not only is it the triage table, but I think this will be really important information for the SPO as well as coordinated access, is that we are connected to a provincial database. So every time a situation comes forward, whether it's approved or not, we are recording the risk factors that are associated with every single situation. And so after time, we will get to see what's specifically happening in Nanaimo as far as risk factors. That will help organizations if there's some internal barriers, because we know that sometimes not sharing information can really be harmful to an individual or family that needs protection. The other thing is what other communities back east who've been doing this for quite some time, they start to notice risk factors that are really prevalent, and then they can start addressing policies and practices towards that risk factor. I know I gave an example earlier today of a community in Saskatchewan, where over 95% of their situations had alcohol as a risk factor. So they focused in on that. They did programming and initiatives, and they were able to reduce that. So that's a secondary piece that will come out of the situation table that will be really helpful for the SPO as well as coordinated access.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, thank you to staff for this comprehensive report. I actually think a lot of folks don't realize what we're doing and the scope of what we're doing, and I really appreciate the framing of the downstream, midstream, and upstream. I'm a firm believer. I'm really glad you included Parks and Rec, because I really think the more skateboard parks we build, the more football fields we build, et cetera, the more free program we can offer kids, the better that is for the community downstream. I cheekily want to answer the mayor's question about outcomes of the SPO and remind everyone that during the health and housing assessment, we discovered that 90% of the funds coming into the community to deal with these issues come through provincial entities such as BC Housing and Island Health. So the city of Nanaimo and those who are working on the ground here actually only have about 10% of the funding at their discretion, and the SPO is going to work on coordinating the remaining 10% to ensure that we see the most efficient use of resources. The integrated coordinated access dollars, I understand, are coming under the remit of the SPO. And to Councillor, I believe, Gesselbrock's point of telling our story and how we sometimes slip up with that, I think the SPO is going to allow us to do that as well. A question regarding the Strengthening Communities funding. I note here that our funding runs out summer 2023 on that. So do we have plans in place with Nanaimo First Nation to continue the program that we began there?
Through the chair to Councillor Hemmens, I know we work quite closely, and I think maybe Director Bupple-Singh might be able to have a few more other comments because she works on several partnerships. But, you know, the units there will be there, you know, the fourplexes that we opened. And I think that there's further partnerships and supports that maybe Director Bupple-Singh can speak to.
Ms. Bopal-Singh.
Through the chair to Councillor Hemmens, while we don't have any secured funding for ongoing operation of those units, one of the things, particularly with the 12, is that Nanaimo is left with a resource that they can program through some of their existing funding through the health center. So that was intentionally set up. While we're on the lookout for other funding, we haven't secured that yet, and we would be bringing that forward to council for their consideration. So a number of things in the works, but when we looked at getting your support and approval for the 12 studio units, it was with the sustainability that it would be continued on through their health center. And the programming may shift, it may be more flexible for them once the parameters of the Strengthening Communities is ended, because that's a fairly, there's a lot of criteria that has to be met through that. So we'll keep you updated as we work with the nation on that. And then we continue to look at seeing if there's a third round of Strengthening Communities programming funding that we might be eligible to also look at, in addition to other funding that comes down. So I've given you a little bit of a non-answer there, but just know that we did anticipate this, and the structure of the way that we did the initial funding looked at what was that sustainability if we couldn't find that ongoing resource. And we're also confident that the nation can, with our support, look at First Nations Health Authority and other funds that we would then be looking at providing letters of support for them to individually do that without us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, and just what Councillor Hemmens was saying, appreciate the framing around downstream, midstream, and upstream. There's a lot of different effort and programs going on. What Councillor Armstrong brought up is kind of interesting, just made me kind of reflect on what was being said. And, you know, a lot of the pressure, I think, is on the crime that we're experiencing. And of course, there's the upstream reasons for it, and repeat offenders, and this is sort of something that's in the narrative at the moment. And, you know, when we had the shooting and the mayor speaking up, that garnered a lot of attention. People really responded well that this was being talked about. We were advocating for action in the province. And I think maybe it is something that we could put more focus on, and this was brought up in our strategic planning, is, you know, what are we doing advocacy-wise? What are the things that we've already done, like having a list of that, and then also how we're communicating that to the public, and having that as an actual program that we're investing in. And I know we do, but even have it more intentional and packaged as this is part of what we're doing. Because a lot of these things around criminal justice reform, we've got no real power in programming and jurisdiction to affect, But the one thing that we do have is being able to tell our story, acknowledge what the community is feeling, and then from our experience on the ground, having a pretty good idea. Like, I bet you in this room, we probably have a pretty good idea of what the province actually needs to do and invest in to take the pinch points on, or what they need to be asking the federal government. That knowledge is here. And I think being able to message that and then have that as a very distinct program of what we do and that we report on to the community is something that I think that I would like to see. And I think there's a consensus around the council table for this and what we spoke in our street plan. And I guess my question is to Mr. Rudolph, is that something that will be coming towards council around just sort of an articulation of our advocacy program, what we're doing, what we're asking for around these major pinch points that the community is experiencing, and a communication strategy around that? A lot of this stuff is happening, but to be able to formalize it, present it, and show it as a specific area of focus.
Through the chair to Councillor Gusbrook, yes to all those. Council has flagged this as a priority topic, one of 4 or 5 in your strategic planning workshops that you've held already. This is not a new topic. The failing in our system is that we've not been communicating what we're advocating. There's been a tremendous amount of advocacy work going on by council, all the UBCM meetings, all the minister meetings, trips to Victoria, trips that are going to be coming to our city by ministers over the coming months. We've reached out for housing, the Attorney General, even at the Premier's level. So I think we could tell our story more about the efforts that are going on. And that's been a common theme from council for some time now, is doing a better job on that. And that's one of the 4 or 5 topics in your strategic priorities discussion so far. So I think we need to focus on that and show how we're demonstrating what we can do. And if any of those ministers come to town, what is the message? And what are we saying to the public? I think to a certain extent, council's chosen a bit of a quiet advocacy approach, which has been respected by the government. But you know, you still have to be publicly advocating as well. And so, you know, we have a lot of connection with the provincial government, and we've been very successful recently with grants and that type of thing. And so there's lots of ways to get support from the government. But your question is, are we going to do? Should we do more? What can we do? Let's focus on that and have some workshops with council, what your ideas are on those things, and we can certainly present what we're doing, and we will continue to put together information packages and that type of thing. And you know, I think council needs to be giving staff direction in terms of that and what you collectively wish the message to be. So right now, we certainly are getting a lot of media attention as a municipality, and certainly a strong message is coming out here to the point where the media is reaching out to this municipality consistently for information because it's fairly presented and credible.
And I see Ms. Gurry wanting to add some comment.
Thank you, Chair. I think Mr. Rudolph actually articulated that really well and basically said what I was going to say, that we have heard you loud and clear, that advocacy and a strategy around advocacy will form part of the overall corporate City of Nanaimo communication strategy. But as Mr. Rudolph said, a lot of council's advocacy to date has been more of a quiet advocacy, because relationships is part of the advocacy effort, and catching more flies with honey than vinegar, as they say, or something the mayor, I'm sure, would say. So there's that part of the strategy as well that would be at council's wishes at the time of the advocacy efforts. And yes, that will be part of your communication strategy and storytelling as well, because you have done a lot of that.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. Councillor?
Yeah, just a follow-up on that. So would we be expecting like a GPC specifically on this?
Through the chair to Councillor Gusbrook, well, the strategic priorities document is scheduled to come back to council at the GPC at the end of April, and we could certainly fast track that component of it. That's a draft that's available now. So yeah, we need to schedule that. That all of those topics in that document need to spend full sessions on, in addition to the city plan. So I think council to date has expected that the city plan will flesh out many of these key issues anyway, but that's not one that would show up in the city plan the same way as some of the other topics. So I think what you're saying is that this is a topic of priority and that you'd like to have a session dedicated to that in the near future, and we can make sure that happens.
Great, thank you. And just another follow-up to around the SBO. I mean, there might be specific topics of the acute pressures that we're feeling around repeat offenders, crime, that it's very topical for our advocacy strategy and public communication. And I think with the SBO around these like longer and larger upstream issues around housing and health situations, I think that like our health and housing plan really clearly laid out like how much investment we need per month or per year to take the pressure off this community, and I think that we've every year the provincial investment and the other agencies that can invest in that, we've fallen well short of that, and I think that we've been kind of relying heavily on this SPO to fill this role around being the community advocate and information coordinator around these items, and I think that maybe looking at sort of where our role is and or how we can make the SBO that are around budget time, around these asks that we do know that we need and level investment that we need, that we spent a lot of money on the research to figure out where the shortfalls are. Are we pressuring quietly or wherever we need to do to maintain relationships at the right times during the year to get those type of investments in the right places? And is my understanding that is the responsibility for that going to fall pretty much for health and housing mostly on the SBO to be doing that type of work? Is that kind of how we've divided that out, or is it something that the city is playing a role in and or will be asking the SBO to be doing this on our behalf? Because I think it's unclear at the moment, and I'm just concerned that there's sort of been expectations set on the SBO to do something that because they haven't sort of appeared at the moment and active on it, that it's not materialized.
Through the chair to Councillor Gesselbrook, these are all valid points. I think there's a fair amount of uncertainty in terms of how this is going to work through. One thing I can say, I reached out to the new executive director last week, and we had a great conversation for half an hour, and we've promised that we will have a monthly at my level just to stay connected. Theme again is communication between what the SPO and what the city is doing and what some of the other service partners. Probably a good idea to have them in here on a somewhat regular basis, either through committee work or that type of thing. As a prerequisite for the funding on an annual basis, I'm suggesting that their business plan be submitted to council as part of the suite of business plans that come in November with all the other major funding entities that the city supports, like the Prosperity Corporation and so forth. So I think that would be a minimum, but there's probably room for forums and those coordinated conversations, because just pushing it off to the SBO is it's probably a bit unfair. And like Mr. McCormick said last week, he feels like he may have to put fences up around what they can do, because I think the expectations may be higher than the ability to deliver. Very new organization. It will take time to get going. It will be effective in the fullness of time. I think the one that I'm aware of in Kelowna, it took a couple of years for it to really find its feet. And so we have to allow time for those things to gel, but at the same time, there's a sense of urgency, and we want to make progress now, but we're not going to, in 5 years' time, we're still going to be having these kinds of conversations, probably, unfortunately, in terms of what's, so investing and being very strategic and systematic will pay dividends over the course of time. My sense is a well-planned workshop with council and checking in would be a very valuable thing with the SPO and maybe the situation table, and maybe we could be a facilitator of something around that. But communication, to my mind, is really important. what are we, as a major funding partner, I would expect council has that expectation that it will want to see that back and forth of communication, yeah, at a council level as well as at a staff level, so.
No, good. Thank you for that. And I think just in this discussion around advocacy and our communication, I think what our expectations of the SBO are, or what around this health and housing advocacy, or what we need to be doing to amplify maybe the research and the findings and the recommendations that they put in terms of our communication. Because I guess what I'm really seeing is that, you know, it's the municipality that feels the pinch points and the pressures and the stresses of all these things that are too big for us to deal with ourselves, but it's our responsibility, I think, to be asking for what we need, and I think the community expects the municipality to be the loudest voice in asking for what we need, and to make sure that we're doing that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Geselbrecht, and thank you, Council. Good comments and questions. I see nobody else on my speakers list, so I will thank Ms. Wood and Mr. LaBerge once again for your reports and the work that you are doing. And we have another report coming up, which is on our draft integrated action plan. I'm going to look to Ms. Gurry, but I'm sure she's going to suggest taking our break now.
You're exactly right, Mr. Chair. So yes, even though it's a little bit early, we do need some time to set up your Zoom for the polls that are going to be occurring.
Right, so councillors will need Zoom access for our next report, and we will take a recess until 3 o'clock. I think
That sounds
that's more
wonderful.
than generous.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Promptly back at 3. Thank you. do have quorum around the table, so I'd like to call our meeting back to order. And we are dealing with the third of our reports.
Sorry.
Got to make sure everyone's disconnected.
If it's me, because I don't know how to connect to all.
I'm going to check every settings and eventually. Oh yeah, you're not next, are you?
I turned mine on, it off, and I signed up.
See, told you. Natalie, it's your fault.
It might be multiple. It's really hard to tell. Oh, shoot.
On the other side, here. Back or something here.
Oh, I just forget how to do it on a computer. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, Natalie told me I was good.
Natalie.
I'm not hearing any feedback, so I think that's.
Your mother was lying to you too when she used to say that again.
All right, we'll try again. And everybody's back in their seats by now. Thank you very much. As we get hooked up for Zooming in the next portion of our program. Mr. Lindsay, are you going to again introduce? It's our draft integrated action plan and draft priority actions.
Yeah, just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, thank you again. Excited to be here this afternoon and really the kickoff for what we're hoping will lead us to a new action plan for the implementation of City Plan, which is in many other things, but also our official community plan. So I'm going to turn it over here in a minute to Ms. Bhopal Singh, but I would start by saying that the sections that we are, well, first of all, I think Ms. Bhopal Singh is going to give you an overview of kind of what we hope to work through with you in the next couple months. But the section today we're focusing on including a healthy Nanaimo. One of the first topics up is community safety and security. So I know we spent a good part of this afternoon on that very topic, so it's kind of a nice transition into this work right now. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Bhopal Singh.
Ms. Bhopal Singh, welcome.
Good afternoon, Council. So you'll recall back in January, we provided you with a little overview of what to expect with the Integrated Action Plan to implement City Plan. And so today I'm going to give you a high-level overview, turn over most of our session to Kasia Mispigan, who will guide us through the conversation. And first of all, I want to start off by looking at and reminding both the community and maybe some of our newer council members of what the intention of the Integrated Action Plan is and how it fits from a governance perspective as taking the citizens' input and all the different pieces that went into City Plan Reimagined, how it links in with the directions that you're giving through your strategic priorities, and how the Integrated Action Plan is intended to work to implement the various goals and the vision of City Plan Nanaimo Reimagined. And this graphic here we find quite useful as staff because it shows what we're seeking from you today is guidance and confirmation around the different actions to implement the City Plan. And with that, the hope is that your guidance and our confirmation of this will then guide our departmental work plans, and everybody at the city will see how their individual work fits in departmental-wise, through the business plans, etc. You may have noticed that the last version of business plans you got tied into City Plan, showing each department's take on how they fit in with implementing City Plan. The other piece you'll see to the left of the monitoring strategy. And the intent is that every year, as part of your review of budgets and your priorities there, it's aligned with the Integrated Action Plan. And the monitoring strategy ties in because it's our opportunity to let you know how well are the different investments and resources that you're putting to projects, are they having the effect that you want to achieve the goals that you've set for us? So there's an interesting connection there, and the monitoring plan you'll get introduced to later on in May with where we're going with that piece. So that's the intention for how that flows together. And then you'll see that what we've given you is a full library of different actions that are drawn from existing council motions, endorsed documents over the past several years that council has, that includes a range of actions, as well as some new ones that we thought might help bring forward to actions that take us forward on the different goals and policies of City Plan. Now, in this session is a bit of an experiment, so we'd like your feedback, how well it works for you. There's many, many different ways. You've gone through a bit of a strategic planning session in terms of a governance piece that also has identified different actions that we've woven into the plan. But we encourage you to come up with other things that we may not have considered. You'll notice that in your library, there are actions that are 0 to 4 years that match with your term, beyond 4 years, and there may be things that you want to prioritize that we have currently categorized in beyond 4 years that you want to lift up. So this is, I hope, a creative and interesting exercise for you of reflection. And what staff have done is a tremendous job across all departments of pulling together existing actions that are floating out there into one place. So we found very few municipalities that have tried this. So we're going to see how you respond to it. And do let us know what's working for you and what's not, because we have several GPC sessions. Now, following up with what you've prioritized, we're starting with goals 3 and 4, which is a healthy and empowered Nanaimo, those 2 goals, and that ties in nicely with our follow-on from our discussion on community safety. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Ms. Spigen, who is going to guide us through that. And maybe I'll just pause before I do that and see if you've got any questions or comments.
I see Councillor Hemmens and then Armstrong. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Chair. For my own clarification, we're understanding how we're going to see the action plans coming forward, as well as dealing with the content of a draft action plan in the theme of Healthy Nanaimo today.
Yeah, through Chair Thorpe to Councillor Hemmens, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Armstrong.
Well, it'll probably be controversial, but I don't believe we should be involved in this at all. I believe that we set the priorities and we've hired experts in the field to get to those priorities. I don't think we should be involved in action plans. So for me, I'll participate today, but after this, I'll be done because I don't believe that's my role. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Just looking at this, there's stars. Those are motions that have already been passed by council. And when the money symbol, that's money that's already allocated and ready to spend. Okay, just clarify. Thank you.
Good. I see no other questions, so we can proceed.
Okay, with that, I'll turn over to Ms. Spigen.
All right. Hello, everybody. Nice to see everyone again. All right, so today we're presenting what Ms. Balpulsing was mentioning was the full library of actions. We recognize this is a very large document, but it really is a comprehensive array of actions that were in existing documents. So it really shows you all the actions over time that various councils have endorsed or passed through motions that the community was involved in. So it's really important to recognize that, yes, it's a large document, but it represents the vision of our community. And that is attachment A to your report. Attachment B is the priority action. So those were pulled from that library of actions by staff as recommendations for consideration today, and that's what we're going to be going through is starting with the healthy section. So just as a quick reminder, there's 2 different types of actions. There's programs and there's projects. And in the priority list, I didn't distinguish between the 2 other than the projects are bolded and they have a specific name. And the difference between a program and a project, again, is a program would apply to the entire city, like Bike to Work Week, versus a project has a specific geographic location, and they've been mapped in the library of actions. And here's an example what that would look like. All right, so in terms of the approach today, we're going to be using Zoom polls. So this is a trial for all of us. And we're going to be starting on the healthy section. So I'm going to ask that you all pull up your attachment B, which is that priority list. I'm just going to quickly give you an overview of what everything means on there. So, Mr. Manley, you did ask a few of the questions, but I just wanted to reiterate that the star does represent council motions that were passed by previous councils, but we are going to be bringing them forward again for this council to consider. And then the money symbol represents, to our best of our ability, actions that are within our financial plans, the 2023 to 2027 financial plan. So in addition to that, we have the programs versus projects, which I talked about, and then the various polls are grouped based on topic areas. So the first one that will come up will be community safety and security. So there'll be a number of questions that will be asked for you, and then you'll go through them. Just take your time. We'll see when people start answering the questions, and then once everyone has answered them, we will then review the results and determine how best to move forward. So for each of the actions, you'll be asked, there'll be 3 options for you. Number 1 is keep the action because it is considered a priority. Number 2 is remove the action because it's not considered a priority. Or number 3 is it needs further discussion before I make that decision. And so there'll be 8 of you today, and so we recommend that, similar to when passing motions, that if it goes to a 4-4 split, we then bring it back to council, or sorry, the committee, you have further discussion, and then a council motion be passed to determine whether to keep or remove that action, just to help staff determine how to manage all those actions that are in front of us. Is there any concerns or questions regarding that approach?
I see Councillor Perino. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, will my vote be counted since I'm on Zoom already and not in the building? Because you said 8, that's why I was concerned. It should be 9.
But there's only 8 of you today.
Oh, that's right, because Councillor Brown is away. That's right. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Of course, we will be counted, of course.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Bhopal Singh?
Through the chair, just letting you know that how about we do a little trial run that doesn't count to just check that we're all good with the technology and how we've structured things.
Of course, we're all good with technology, but it wouldn't hurt to have a trial run.
So just one thing we'd also like to keep in mind before we go forward with the first Zoom poll is there are still quite a few actions. We're at 202 actions on our priority list. That's quite a few still. And so we are recommending by staff in our recommendation, our staff report, is that another approach going forward with the future GPCs is that we provide a survey in advance, which allows you to take the time to review the actions, and then we look at those results and we bring forward to the committee those that require further discussion. So it's just an option. Just think about it when we're going through it. I'm not sure how long it's going to take to go through this approach, but there are various options for you, should you desire them. Okay, so I have a team with me. I have Natalie over here, who's going to be helping me run the Zoom polls. And I will just leave the floor to you. We'll have silence so you can concentrate. And I just ask you to read the questions. I've marked on there which ones have the money symbol and which ones have the council motion symbol as well, as a reminder. And I'll leave the floor to you.
So, Ms. Bhopal Singh, are we doing a pre-test or no?
I think, would you like to do that, Council? And then also just to be clear, you've got in your attachment B the list. And the other thing too is feel free if you want some clarification on the wording of these actions. This is we're not expecting you to not ask questions if there's something that you want to discuss. Yeah.
And Mayor Krog, I believe, has a question.
Thank you.
Sorry. Oh, there we go.
Thank you, Chair, and since I'm probably the most incompetent person in this room when it comes to technology, just to be clear, so question 1, I would have to hit submit each question, or do we submit them as a group at the end of the section? It's submit in each question, is that correct?
Go ahead.
Your Worship, Ms. Sponagle can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I did the test the other day, I answered them all and then submitted when I was done.
Then submitted. So we're going to do it in what I will call groups. So 0 to 7, or 0 of 7 answered. So the 7 will do it submit.
Yes.
And unless I'm mistaken, Chair, and through you, if I can figure this out, which seems to be fairly straightforward, then no one else has an excuse here. I don't know that we need a test run then.
Well, don't overestimate my competence. I see Councillor Hemmons and Armstrong have questions, though. Councillor Hemmons, no? Councillor Armstrong.
My question is, when we've got implement the downtown Nanaimo safety action plan, that's already been implemented, so why would we have that there?
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, there are certain actions that, yes, are ongoing, and so we've included them to ensure.
Even though they've already been done?
There are some aspects of the downtown plan that are ongoing that council continues every year to give budget to. So it's, in some cases, you'll be asked to, I guess, confirm things
Okay.
you've got in play.
Thank you.
Yes, and I should clarify that there's ongoing actions as well as immediate. So the immediate would be you would implement within the next 0 to 4 years.
So are we now looking at the healthy community safety and security?
That's
group?
correct. So you can see on your screen that people are now answering some of the questions as they come in.
Mine aren't.
Oh, looks like we. Okay.
Mine are not submitting.
You have to do them all and then you submit. You can't just submit individually.
Yeah, it's not letting me scroll down to get to the other one. Oh, I can text quickly.
If Natalie can make it work for me, she can make it work for anybody.
I'm trying to access this as an answer, but I can't move the scroll. Oh, it is.
See, it was a breeze.
Yeah. Touch wood.
That was embarrassing.
No, not at all.
Okay, so we have our results. Thank you, everybody. So I guess the question is, I can go through them, or are we going to do it again? Because that was a test trial. Is everyone happy with their results? Do it again?
Oh.
I'm happy with my.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure council decided they didn't need a test
They
run.
didn't? Okay,
Yeah.
apologies, I didn't hear that. Okay, so when we look at number 58, we had, oh my goodness, my eyesight's not that good, 6 out of 8 that said that was a priority, so we'll leave that one. We'll move on to number 59, which was once again 6 out of 9 that voted in, or 6 out of 8, apologies, that voted in favor of keeping that action. Number 60 was 7 out of 8, so that motion or that action will remain as a priority. Then we have number 61, which was, 5 out of 8, so that was a majority vote, so that action will remain as a priority. Number 62 was all in favor of that action, and number 63 was also all in favor of keeping that action. And number 64 was 6 out of 8. So unless there's further discussion, we'll move on to the next poll and the next topic area, which is affordable housing. So all of those actions remain as priorities. Okay. So next is the topic of affordable housing, and that's numbers 65 to 74.
We're doing well so far.
Okay, we have our results. Thank you, everybody. And I just wanted to reiterate that we will be bringing all these actions back to the committee for endorsement. This is simply just to help staff sort through all the actions that we brought forward to you. All right, so starting with number 65, we had 6 in favor of keeping the action and 2 discussing further discussion as needed. So based on the majority vote, we'll keep that as a priority. Number 66, we had 7 out of 8 voted in favor of keeping that as a priority. Number 67 was 4 out of 8 in favor of keeping this priority. So I think because we had a split vote, do you want to keep that as an action? Sheila, is that what we agreed upon?
I believe we agreed that we would flag it for further discussion and have them vote on it. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we'll just, instead of going through the next ones, we'll just open the floor up for further discussion regarding that action. So I can read it to the group. Oh, I just moved my screen, number 67. Where were we? Yes, so it reads, so this was a previous council motion. Consider new authority in the Local Government Act to not require public hearings for rezonings.
Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Manley.
Thank you. I actually participated in the BC study on this, and the public was overwhelming in favor of keeping the public hearings. It's their only chance to be heard. So for me, I think it's very important that we keep public hearings because there's no other way the public has an opportunity to show their support or dissatisfaction. So I'm in favor of keeping public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Just a question to staff. So is this strictly for affordable housing? This isn't for supportive housing rezoning?
Through to the chair, to Councillor Manley. So this could apply to any rezoning. So I think the criteria would typically be if the rezoning application was consistent with city plan, then like the land use designation in city plan, then council could consider not requiring a public hearing and proceeding through to the readings and rezoning of the property.
Okay. I think I'd probably still want to have some kind of public hearing because city plan is huge and there's going to be different neighborhoods that want different things and I think it's good to leave that open to the public to discuss and let us know how they feel.
Thank you. Mayor Krug. There you are.
Thank you very much, Chair, and your voice is awfully soft today. Just to confirm what you've said, so if it's in the official community plan, we wouldn't require a public hearing. That's basically the approach. Is that correct?
Correct.
I think that satisfies me. Thank you.
And sorry, I just removed your name, Councillor Geselbrock. You were next. There we
You
go.
know, this is one of those things that, you know, there will be some controversy around it, and there's a lot of merits for it, because I think there's aspects in just how we're doing development that it slows up the process, and I'm not 100% convinced that there's not other ways that the public can provide feedback in some of these mechanisms, different mechanisms to ensure that council and that we're following what the official community plan is, and you know, making sure that everybody's interests is being taken into consideration. I think that the process, how it's set up, sometimes sets unnecessary conflict at play, and things do need to be changed, and so I'm supportive of going down this route and exploring it further. And I know there'll be other decision points on this in front of council, but I want to explore this further and have it come before council. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
And if I may, I don't see any other speakers. I'll just comment that I'm strongly in support of maintaining public hearings in all situations. I think that's our duty, to listen to the public, not to impose without some type of consultation. and process. So, and I would also add, while I have the chance, that I like the idea of being able to vote and then discuss right away while the reason for our voting is fresh in our mind. So I'm sort of leaning towards that option later. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, Councillor Perino has her hand raised.
And I will go to Councillor Perino, and then I will go to Councillor Eastmuir and Manley. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was struggling with this particular question because I had assumed that it was just about the term affordable housing. So options that would allow for a faster building of homes that are in a subsidized environment. So you're right. I don't want to get rid of public hearings either, but I just would like to move up the process for subsidized housing in a faster way. So if there was a way to move that forward, then I would be in favor of it. So I can take my vote away on the, keep. I can take that away. It's confusing. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Through the chair, just before you go on, we will be getting another vote of this after you've had the further discussion, just so we can move on and decide whether to keep it or not, because it was a tie. So after you've heard from everybody and your discussion is done, you will get a chance to re-vote, Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Eastmuir.
Thank you. Yes, similarly to Councillor Perino, I did think this was specifically around affordable housing initiatives, recognizing that public hearings are really important for people to be able to weigh in, but I also find it sometimes frustrating with the public hearing process in general, especially when they're speaking to something where the rezoning is aligned with the OCP. Then I kind of feel like as a councillor, like I kind of have to support the rezoning because it's in the OCP, but if I don't necessarily support the project in general, I feel like it puts us in a really tricky position. So, but yeah, that's our job. But I think the public hearing is really important, and I will learn better how to balance those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, well, I mean, this is just a comment. We're looking at this. It says consider new authority, rather than which implies further discussion is necessary, rather than implement new authority, which would mean that we were just passing this off right now. So I think we're already talking about considering new authority. So I'm going to vote yes in that case because I would like to consider it.
Good point. Thank you. All right, no other speakers? Oh, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, through the chair. And I just, maybe less for council and more for anybody who's watching this at home, just to be 100% clear about what we're talking about. So this was one of 8 or 10 kind of initiatives that council discussed at a GPC, I guess it was last fall, around housing and about how to bring forward more affordable housing. And again, I think Councillor Manley hit it there with those final comments, is it's really about, do we want to pursue this and have further discussions on this or not? Because it is something that although in some ways it's always been available to local governments, the province made some changes recently around legislation, which basically opened this up more broadly. And some communities have taken advantage of it and others have reviewed it and decided not to proceed. So this is just a question of, do we even want to have that discussion and pursue it? So all those things that I'm hearing today is, if we went ahead and decided, yeah, we're going to take a look at it, all those questions about, well, what kind of projects does it apply to? Do we have limits? Do we have other processes in place? Those are all the types of things we would then get into and discuss if this was something we wanted to pursue. So it's not a final vote, and I didn't want to get the public to have the impression this was a final vote from council today about taking away public hearings. This is about, do we want to go and explore that and have that discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. That's a very important clarification for anybody listening or watching. And Councillor Geselbrecht.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think the easiest thing for a politician to do is consider. So we're not making any big hard and fast decisions here. And I think just around the public hearing around specific things, like there is the possibility of really bounding, very specifically in these particular areas that we've identified in the city that are, we definitely want it here, which would not include all the potential rezonings, just a very specific, smaller subset of it where we've identified affordable housing. That is in the realm of possibility. So this would be the parameters that we would be considering, which I do think it's very worthwhile to have that information brought forward, because it could help us move forward, some of our big objectives without too much downside, and still maintaining, the sanctity of public hearings in most realms. So thank you.
I see nobody else.
Sorry, Chair, this microphone is slow. So would council then please re-vote? You can just do it by hand if you would like to consider, so future discussion, new authority in the Local Government Act to not require public hearings for rezonings.
So this is a raise your hand vote?
Yeah.
Then would you like to conduct it, or should I, Ms. Gurry?
You can go ahead and review that.
All right.
Yeah.
So raise your hand if you are in favor of keeping this as a priority. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hands up. And those in favor of removing it? I see 2 hands, and those who wish further discussion. And I see Councillor Perino's hand. Does that add up to 8?
That does, Mr. Chair, so we will be keeping this for further consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, that was fun. Shall we move on?
We shall move on. All right, number 68, 7 out of 8 committee members voted in favor of keeping this as a priority. So moving on to number 69, there was a split vote. So I'm going to read out the action, and this was a previous council motion. And it reads, provide an education and awareness campaign for developers and other housing providers on ways the city supports affordable housing. So once again, is their desire to have staff look further into this action? Is it a priority for staff to focus on?
Councillor Hemmons, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I voted to remove this priority simply because I don't think our development community needs an education campaign. I think as long as we're clearly communicating what we need and what we offer, we probably don't need to spend staff time on an awareness campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I second Councillor Hammond's words. I think we're giving staff so many priorities, and do they have the capacity to do it? And I don't think this is one that's huge. I think our developing community gets it. And if not, many of us at this table can go have those conversations as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eastmuir.
I voted further discussion simply because I would like maybe as council to discuss the ways that the city supports affordable housing and whether there may be additional incentives or sticks that we could potentially use as a city to increase the amount of affordable housing, specifically the focus on below market rate and tied to income affordable units.
Thank you. And Councillor Geselbrecht.
Thanks, Chair. I guess my question to staff on this, was this identified as a gap? Like, have we been receiving applications or, in the development approval process, seeing like, oh, wow, this proposal, they had no awareness on what possibilities and things are out there, and if they did know, we probably wouldn't have to walk them through it and walk each individual through it each time, or we don't even get the chance to walk them through it, and it just is never a possibility because they don't know about it. I just was wondering if it was an identified gap and why that's why it appeared.
Through the chair, I think it somewhat hinges on the term of what do you qualify as a developer. And I think more experienced developers in the community or housing providers would probably have a pretty good understanding of, the incentives, I guess the carrots and sticks that the city has for affordable housing. But when I read something like this, I think more about maybe single-family homeowners who don't know about secondary suites programs or opportunities to do other kinds of infill in communities. So maybe some more targeted outreach on those types of opportunities.
Right, okay, thank you. So it's not, there wasn't any big glaring gap. It's like this is a potential avenue that we could pursue.
Back through the chair, I think, again, it's very similar to the discussion you're having today. It's about making sure our story's told and that it's communicated out to people about what's available.
Because I think all the council is very aware of the enormous amount of work that needs to be done in the limited, staff capacity, and don't want to add, something onto an action list that means it's going to take away from something else that could be providing bigger bang. But, I think some of this education could be, pretty easily achieved without too much effort, but getting the word out there. And so, I support keeping this.
Thank you. I have Councillor Manley and then Councillor Perino. Councillor Manley?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'm just curious about when what we do have in terms of incentivizing, like so that people that are thinking about secondary suites might be considering, and I'm not sure what options we do have in terms of affordable housing for secondary suites, and what incentives we do have. I honestly don't know. So I'm sure lots of people wouldn't know, and I'm wondering if there's an easy 101. Is that what the proposal is? Or I can't imagine we're going to be doing a broad campaign reaching out to the whole community, like, have you considered a secondary suite in your home? If people are thinking about it, they're thinking about it, and they're probably coming to the planning department with an idea. Is there a sort of a 101 of things to consider, and what are the incentives? I have no idea what incentives are there for affordable housing for somebody who's doing a minor development like that.
Mr. Lindsay.
Well, I'd start with your chair that we have a very popular document called Home Sweet Homes that people can look up and learn all about bringing secondary suites into the community. But we do not see this as a large labor-intensive program. It's just about focused engagement, and it could be as simple as making sure that our website's updated to have all of the information in one place, and using social media and other ways to make sure that message gets out. But we're not seeing this as a major initiative.
Okay, wouldn't take a lot of staff time, and just something that people could be made aware of when they do show up at planning or whatever with an idea.
Thank you. And Councillor Perino, your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly agree with Councillor Emmons and Armstrong, but my thinking was exactly as Mr. Lindsay suggested. It's so simple, and particularly for new developers that come in. The regular developers, they're going to know all this, but the new ones that come in, we should always be educating them to some extent. So I'll be keeping this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So how do we proceed on this one? Another hand vote? All right, and just before I call that vote, I have to comment that, and I've said this before, I think how somebody votes is important, but what is more important is knowing why they vote a certain way. And this forum is giving us an opportunity to explain our vote and maybe clear up some misunderstandings or get further clarifications. That said, I'm not going to change my vote, so here we go. All those in favor of keeping this as a priority, please raise your hand. I see one definite, one tentative. No, I'm kidding. One, oh, sorry. I'll wait a second. Keep as a priority the education awareness program.
Would you like me to read it again?
Councillor Perino is definitely a hand up. Others? Councillor Manley. So I'm seeing two. And those for removing this as a priority. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. And those wishing further discussion. And I'm not seeing any hands. Yes. Yes, I think we need to redo this.
I think failed. I kind of think I know where Tyler is going to land on this one.
Well, Councillor Brown is not here, so. So, Ms. Gurry, a revote, is that what's required?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. Normally, when in the absence of a raised hand, we would count it as the affirmative, but because we're doing it three ways, if you could get a revote too. So those in favor of keeping it?
I see Councillors Eastmuir,
Four.
Geselbrecht, Manley, and Perino.
And removing it?
Those for removing it,
So there's
Councillors
four.
Armstrong,
Okay.
Emmons, Thorpe, and Krog. So there's 8 of us here today. It is 4-4 on that vote.
So I think by virtue, it won't come back for, it will be removed then. You've failed it twice now, so yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, moving on. We go on to number 70. So we had 6 committee members in favor of keeping it and 2 requesting further discussion, so we'll go with the majority. Number 71, we had 7 committee members in favor and 1 requesting further discussion, so that action remains. And then we have number 72 with the same vote. We have, 7 in favor, 1 requesting to remove it, so that action remains. And number 73, we had 100%, oh no, that was a different, number 73, we had 6 in favor of keeping it and 2 in favor of removing it. That motion or that action will remain. And then number 74, we had 3 in favor of keeping and 5 requesting further discussion. So we'll open up to the committee to have that discussion. And that one again, I'll read out, is an immediate action under affordable housing that says finalize the Park Avenue concept plan, which is 933 Park Avenue, including consideration of affordable housing.
Council, any comments on this? Councillors, lots of comments. Councillor Eastmuir, you're first.
So this is the 5-acre farm property. So I definitely want to have more discussion on this because I believe we haven't seen the final concept plan for that. And when last time we discussed it as a council, there was a lot of concern around the potential direction on that. So it was my understanding that would be coming back for discussion. And like, I really support affordable housing initiatives, but I really think this is a special piece of property because of the farming heritage of it. And I think the intention of the site needs to be reserved for, community farm agricultural use. And the plan to put townhouses on it, I think, is completely disconnected from the intention of that property. And I'm seeing a lot of concern in the community at large from people who really supported the city's initial buying of that property to protect it as a farm. I think we definitely need to discuss this further, and I don't want to see that plan move any further ahead until we have more of a discussion on it.
Thank you. Councillor Geselbrecht.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to staff. This action item is about bringing forward some plan to come back to council to have a review. So it's not setting things in stone or saying, go ahead, write an MOU with BC Housing and let's go for it. That being said, I think it is one of those things where, seeing what the footprint was, it was going to make it, potentially the 3-acre farm. And I think a lot of people in the community that supported the whole effort to preserve it, I think the scale of the housing proposed was more than a lot of people expected. And so I think that needs to be really closely reviewed and more in-depth discussion on. And I want to avoid staff, and maybe a lot of this work's already done, going farther down the rabbit hole with BC Housing and doing a lot of work that may not be in the direction that council is wanting it to go. So I think I could support this action if that is kept in mind and a concept plan is brought to council in a much earlier stage to have that discussion. And so I guess that's the question to staff is sort of, was that the intention, or where things are at?
Through Chair Thorpe to Councillor Gaspard, that's exactly it. And really, if you take the first part, finalize the Park Avenue concept plan, it's just getting council's confirmation that your intention is to have a concept plan endorsed at some point, regardless of what the various uses are that you have yet to discuss. So I might suggest that the first part, finalize the Park Avenue concept plan. You could stop it there, and then of course all the various uses would be coming forward for you for consideration. So if that raises comfort in terms of the language.
Great. Well, we can
We have
consider anything, so.
Exactly, exactly.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I think this is actually one that needs to go to the council table for vote. I think it's that important that we need to bring it there, and it shouldn't be done at the committee level, because we do have Councillor Brown, who's absent, who was here through the start of it. I think we have to remember that affordable housing was part of the plan all along when we purchased it, but to the extent of what's been proposed, I don't know if that was what was in our feelings, and I would like to see how much of the land that is going to be affordable housing would it even be good for farmland? It may not be. So I think that we need much more further discussion on it. So for me, I'm not prepared to vote on it today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not opposed to some affordable housing on this site, but it's all about the form, the footprint, and the structure of that housing. And the majority of land that you could build on is agriculturally viable. There's lots of land there that's not viable because it's wetland. There's a large area that's wetland that will be dedicated for park no matter what. So I would like to see some drafts of the concept plan and some different ideas about what the form and of housing could be on there, because there's been different ideas floated, and I know that some housing providers want to see at least 30 units or 50 units before they're going to commit to getting involved in a project, and I think that that's a bit more of a grander scale than most people who advocated for saving this piece of property would be interested in accepting. So I think it's something, it's going to involve a little larger community discussion as it moves forward, but I'm interested in seeing some concept plans.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Chair. I voted in favor of keeping this as a priority precisely for the pieces that Councillor Geselbrock mentions. I think that we want to see the concept plan to have that conversation at the council table. I agree. My question is, what if we remove this? Like, what are we toying with? We own the property, but for the next 5 years, we won't do anything with it? Is that the outcome of removing this today?
Through Chair Thorpe to Councillor Hemmens, that's an excellent question. This would basically say it's just not a priority for you to finish a concept plan in the next 4 years. So just to take us back to the 10,000 foot level, whether it's this or anything else, things like finalized, things are in play, it's just confirming your direction that something that's in play continues to be a priority. It doesn't mean that you're endorsing anything that you haven't seen yet in terms of concepts. So if you were to remove it, you can move it into the beyond 4 years as an option. If you take it out, then it tells us that's no longer a priority for us to return to you with concepts to consider.
And Ms. Gurry, you had something to add?
Yes, and Ms. Bopal-Singh can correct me if I'm off base, but because it was a 5 for further discussion necessary, and because this was planned to come back to council for the concepts and that further discussion, I don't suggest you vote on keeping it or removing it. I think leaving it as further discussion necessary at this point might be a good place to leave it at. I'm not sure if that's something that we would like today.
Mayor Krog.
Thank you very much, Chair. And if I understand this correctly, it's simply finalize the Park Avenue concept plan, including consideration of affordable housing. which is the very reason we bought the property in the first place, was to ensure that we retained it for agricultural purposes. And great thought was given to the concept of some affordable housing on it. And the question for us today is whether we consider the concept, which has not been settled on, provided, et cetera, is an important priority. As far as I'm concerned, it's pretty clear it is a priority. We bought the damn land, so let's leave it as a priority, because we want to get on with it and do something useful with it. Right now, it's not, with respect, it's providing some benefit to a few folks who are working on it, but it's not otherwise. So I'm wondering if maybe, we started with some fear amongst members of council that there was a plan and we were expected to endorse it today when there is no plan. So it's a priority, so let's keep it as a priority.
Thank you. And I think we're into second-time speakers, so I would ask people to be concise, please. Councillor Geselbrecht?
Thank you, yes. The Mayor and Councillor Hemmens expressed exactly what I was thinking. I think this is just saying, let's keep pursuing this and we're going to sort it out with further discretion, so I'm in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Manley?
I would agree. I think let's just keep it moving, keep the ball moving forward. Let's look at concept plans and discuss those concept plans when they hit the table.
Thank you. No other speakers on this one, so I think we're clear on the path ahead, and that is it will be at some point a discussion at council table. I see nods. All right, thank you. What's next?
Okay, we'll be moving on to intergenerational living as the next topic area. And just before I move forward, any questions or concerns or recommendations that you'd like to see changed as we go along? Are we happy with this approach right now? Hearing none, I'm going to keep going. All right, so there's 5 actions in here, 2 ongoing and 3 immediate, and a few of them have a money symbol as well as council motion associated with them. All right, so we have all the results. Thank you, everybody. So for number 75, we had 7 in favor of keeping the LEAP program, 1 requesting further discussion, so that action remains. Number 76, we had 5 in favor of keeping the action, so that one will remain. Moving on to number 77, we had 7 in favor of keeping the priority, so that will be kept. And then we have number 78, 7 in favor of keeping the action, and 1 requesting further discussion, so that action will remain. And we have a split vote for number 79, so we have 3 in favor of keeping the priority, 2 requesting to remove it, and 3 requesting further discussion. So I'm going to open up to the floor. So it's an ongoing action, and it reads, this is specific to Bowen Park, work with Island Health to create a memory clinic.
All right, here we go. Councillor Armstrong, you're first.
Thank you. This is the first I've heard of this, and for me, our priority has to be getting our hospital fixed, bringing in the cardio and the cancer, and I don't think we should be pushing that on that. My mom had dementia, as many are aware. We have great supports already in the community through the Alzheimer's Society and stuff, so for me, this is not a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eastmere.
I voted to keep, but actually I think I'd like to change my vote to removing it, because as Councillor Armstrong said, I think we need to keep all of our focus on the hospital, and we have limited bandwidth, and so does Island Health. So I don't want to draw any attention away from the importance of the new hospital amenities.
Thank you. Councillor Geselbrock.
Thank you. I definitely understand the sentiment of making sure that we have priorities in our advocacy and work with Island Health, and we don't want to, have competing efforts. That being said, the memory clinic is the first I've heard of this, and I'm sure there's a great need for this, and I was just curious to hear a little bit more on it, and whether the worry of it competing against, this larger effort of building a hospital is founded, or if they're parallel things that both can be accomplished, and the scale. Thank you.
Mr. Harding, it looks like you wish to make a contribution. A quick one.
Thank you, Chair, to the committee. So if Council recalls, the previous council made a couple of motions last year, I believe it was where possible to continue the concept of what we were able to achieve at the Aquatic Center in converting some of our spaces to provide some types of health support in our other facilities, and Bowen Park was included. The other motion was if ever building new facilities, that we include primary care into those facilities. So we took this to work with existing facilities. So when we say a memory clinic, this is maybe not the right term as we're working it through, but working with doctors and VHA, there is this desire of trying to get some more facilities, particularly now with some seniors facilities in some of our recreation centers, and particularly in this one, Bowen Park. So the goal here was really converting one of our rooms there, can be used, still used for other uses, but can also be there for programs that we can bring seniors into this area. Particularly use the term memory clinic because there was a real desire for providing some other space where groups and families can come with particularly people starting to show signs of Alzheimer's and other memory loss, that there's some programming. The idea being that once they're in our facilities, they also can see a lot of other positive, what we like to continue to say, upstream solutions, even for seniors, of other activities they can utilize. So this is relatively small, kind of continuation with the scale of what you'd see at the Aquatic Center.
Great, and just a follow-up to that, thank you. I think just hearing the scale of this, and I think we committed to, we did some, I don't want to use the wrong term here, but senior-friendly city initiative. I think this is very aligned with that commitment. And I think that it could be accomplished and be a meaningful use of our space that would be a benefit to a lot of people. So I am inclined to keep it, and I'm not too worried about it competing for funding and effort towards the hospital build out. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Mayor Krogh next, and then Councillor Perino, and then others on the list.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very quick. Mr. Harding used the term program. That's exactly what this is. To me, this is the equivalent of arguing over whether or not we'll rent a room to the Historical Society. So I think we're spending far too much time talking about something which is really quite straightforward and is not going to impact priorities with Island Health. So I'm supportive of keeping it.
Thank you. Councillor Perino, you're next.
Chair. And after hearing Mr. Harding, of course, it changes the entire thinking around this. The term memory clinic is a very poor, it's a very poor wording. It should say something like a program for respite, or, a daycare, involving seniors in need. It certainly shouldn't be the term memory clinic. It's much better than that, and I agree, it's a recreational program, and it doesn't say that. So I certainly would be in favor of keeping this as a priority, just given what Mr. Harding has said. So thank you so much. I couldn't understand why we were even getting into this field. This is an Island Health initiative, but not when you hear it from Mr. Harding and what they're talking about. So very much in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Manley, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to hear that this was a previous council that heard about this, because I don't recall hearing about it, and I wasn't sure if I needed to check into a memory clinic. But I see that this is basically just providing space to Island Health, and this is a proposal going forward that all of our different facilities, we're going to be having some component and providing space to Island Health or other organizations that are involved in healthcare. I know, I've gone to the physiotherapy clinic at the Aquatic Center, which is a great location for that, because you can integrate exercise and everything else right there on the spot. So I would support this. I don't see it conflicting with the hospital or our key priorities at all. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, thank you now that it's been explained, because a memory clinic's about 80 million minimum. So, but I would also suggest that the people that do the most work isn't Island Health with this. It's actually Alzheimer's Society. They have a very good program. I would like to see that included, because they're the ones that are always struggling for space, and they've got the most people utilizing programs. So besides Island Health, I think we actually found Island Health terrible for that, and we did a lot through Alzheimer's. So I would like to see more of that work, and thank you. So I'll change my vote now that I had clarification that it's not a memory clinic. Thank you.
Thank you, and I also appreciate the clarification from Mr. Harding, but I'm still a little bit leery, so I would be voting for further discussion, because I would need to know specifics before I commit to taking on any of Island Health's responsibilities. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Chair. I was just listening to the dialogue and the conversation. It's timely for us to come back, and so I've been working specifically with FIHA on this, but also with Dr. Poderico. And it's like any program, it evolves, and we've moved us along a stream of what we think is the most appropriate. So we'll try and come back to council with an updated report of what we're trying to achieve, so council can see it. But it definitely is more than just recreational programming. It is trying to bring some health integration into our centers, which we've seen a real benefit of. As Councillor Manley mentioned, at the Aquatic Center, we have therapeutic sessions going on all day long. This is trying to find some of those therapeutic health-related activities that can be integrated into our other centers.
Thank you. So, Ms. Gurry, I've heard several councillors indicate they might be changing their vote. Do we want to re-vote on this one? All right, then I will call for a show of hands. Those in favor of keeping this as a priority. I see Councillors Armstrong, Eastmuir, Hemmens, Krog, and Manley, and Councillor Perino. Yes, I've got her. Did I say Councillor Geselbrock? Sorry. Yes. And that doesn't leave too many of us. Those for removing it? Seeing no hands, and I indicated I would appreciate further discussion. There we go.
Thank you.
And that concludes
just cognizant
this.
of the time, that it's 4 o'clock, would we like to keep going, or?
Sorry, I didn't hear the
Just recognizing
question.
it's 4 o'clock, do we like to keep going as a committee, or would we like to break?
Do we have a sense of how much longer we have?
Yeah, we have the remaining topics to review are food security, which are about 10 actions in one group, emergency management, and then recreation, culture, and wellness. We have 3 more topics.
And so, Mr. Chair, the meeting is scheduled until 5, but we just wanted to do a check-in. I think we could probably be done at 4:30 if you wanted to carry on and finish. It's just the purple section in your agenda package that
Yes,
we're
thank you.
working through today.
Councillor Geselbrock.
Like, do we want to take a bio break so that we come back? Is that the?
We just go.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, no, I mean, I can quickly
Council-
get up and.
Let me ask a very quick show of hands. Who would appreciate a 5-minute break?
Nobody.
Who's in favor of continuing? And I think we move on, plow ahead, and if we can aim for 4:30, I would personally appreciate it.
Onwards and upwards. All right, moving on to food security. We have ongoing actions, 3 of those, and we have quite a few immediate actions for review, most of which are projects. So we'll open up the survey or the poll. All right, thank you, everybody. All the results are in. So number 80, we had all committee members in favor of keeping this as a priority. Number 81, we had 7 in favor of keeping as a priority, so that one will remain. Number 82, we had 6 in favor of keeping this as a priority and 2 requiring further discussion, so that action will remain as a priority. Okay, and number 84, we have 5 committee members in favor of keeping and 3 requesting further discussion. Oh, did I miss 83? Apologies. Number 83 was 5 in favor of keeping as a priority, 1 in favor of removing, and 2 requesting further discussion, so that action will remain as a priority. Moving on to number 85, we have 4 in favor of keeping as a priority, 1 requesting to remove it, and 3 requesting further discussion. So that one will require further discussion, Sheila, is that correct? Or do we want to, yeah, okay. So I'll open up to the committee members to have a further discussion on that one. And that one reads, immediate action, Diver Lake Park, integrate fishing features into the design of future sections of the boardwalk/trail.
And we're on
85.
number 6, which is number 85. And I'll start, if I may, on this one, and I'll confess that on several of these, I voted for further discussion simply because these come as news to me, and maybe I've missed them along the way. But most of these fishing-related features I just need to know more about, especially the costing and what it would look like, what impact it would have, and so on. So having said that, Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, so all 3 of these related to fisheries. I was curious about, do all of these lakes get stocked? And if they do, who's responsible for stocking the lakes? Because I imagine that if we're opening up Divers Lake or Long Lake for fishing, there's a limited amount of fish that will be in that habitat and wouldn't be long before they were fished out. So I imagine that they are stocked, and I'm curious about who stocks them and how is that paid for?
Mr. Harding.
So, Your Worship, as our chair through the Councillor Manley. So they're stocked by through a provincial government program. There's an organization that stocks them, and the stocking program, the hatchery program, is sponsored or paid for by fishing license fees.
Okay,
so we don't pay for any of the stocking, but fishermen, anglers pay for the.
So we would just be paying for a little bit of infrastructure?
It'd be providing more access, if that's something people want, is more physical access.
And so Westwood, we already have a couple of fishing docks at Westwood, is that correct?
We have one. People do fish off different locations, particularly the dam, but we do have the one, not the best location, it's, to be honest, but there's one there right now. We also have one at Long Lake, at Diver Lake. Yeah.
There's one at each of the lakes currently?
Yeah, we have not as very good a facility at Green Lake, but of course all the dams have some good opportunity for fishing also at the 3 colliery dams.
Right. Yeah, I see people fishing out at colliery dams all the time, and it seems, family activity. Some people like to do that. So, is colliery also stocked?
All 3 of the collieries are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've seen lots of fishing at Long Lake and Diver and, and Westwood. For me, I was like you, I was either asking for further discussion or removal, because every time we want to expand, sections of the boardwalk or whatever, I'm thinking of the cost. So, that's why I was voting against them. It's either too much money and not a priority for me. So that's where I was coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Just,
Oh, sorry, I just turned off your microphone. There we go.
I just want to confirm that there's no budget or staffing implications to these.
Chair to Councillor Armstrong, other than any expansions that we do for our boardwalks or trails, we're always expanding and improving on. So those are the typical improvements to it. As well as council will recall, we do a number of disabled fishing piers throughout the community. Those piers, since we have one at Long Lake and Diver Lake and Westwood Lake, and we're trying to do some improvements at Colliery for those with accessibility issues also.
But a lot of those improvements would be done anyhow, correct? So thank you.
I see no other speakers. Oh, I do. Mayor Crow, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was kind of surprised, actually, at number 6 and 7 that people would be not interested in keeping this as a priority. It's cheap, it's healthy, it encourages use of our parks, gets people outdoors. You're going to deny all those lovely grandparents the opportunity to teach their grandchildren how to fish? Sounds kind of grinchy to me.
Yes, yes, thank you, Mayor Krogh. I confess that I wanted further discussion, which we have had, and it's been very valuable. Thank you. So, Ms. Gurry, do we need to re-vote on this one? All right, then we shall. So we're on number 6, which is recommendation 85. Those in favor of keeping it as a priority. Hands up, please. Councillors Armstrong, Eastmuir, Geselbrock, Hemmens, Thorpe, Krogh, Manley, and also Councillor Perino. And I will ask anybody who is opposed and wants it removed to cast their vote.
Nothing.
Sorry, I see none. And further discussion? Nobody.
I just, a few more fishing piers would be great. On Westwood, sometimes I'm diving off the cement area there, and a little worried sometimes of people casting over top of my head. So it is something that I have noticed at Westwoods that's highly used by people, and it's a great program that our fish are being stocked, and what a lovely thing to do. So, thanks.
Thank you, and you've inspired another comment from Councillor Manley, hopefully not another bad joke.
I was just going to say I was hooked by the discussion.
Oh, I knew it.
And the information from staff. So thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. So
yes,
number
please.
7, which is priority number 86. So there was a split vote there, so we'll go to further discussion, and it reads as an immediate action: Lakeview Park, which is also known as Long Lake, install a fishing float / multi-use access points at Lakeview Park for fishing, harvesting, and launching. And this is as it relates to food security.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong.
I think our previous discussion answered all the same questions, so I think we should just go straight to a vote, because I think it was the lack of knowing about budgeting stuff instead of going into discussion.
I was going to suggest the same thing, so unless I hear otherwise, Ms. Gurry. So let's do a hand vote on number 86. Those in favor of keeping it as a priority. Councillors Armstrong, Eastmuir, Geselbrock, Hemmens, Thorpe, Krogh, Manley, and Councillor Perino, which I believe is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Moving on to number 87, which was 9 through 3 Park Avenue. We had 6 in favor of keeping it as a priority, so that one will remain. And then number 88 was also 5 in favor of keeping Westwood Lake Park as a priority, and so that will remain as well. So we will move on, I believe, to the next poll. So the next poll is regarding emergency management, as well as recreation, culture, and wellness. The recreation, culture, and wellness section is quite large, so it was split into 2 separate polls. So there will be certain sections of the PRCW that will be included within this poll to keep in mind. All right, thank you, everybody. So in regards to emergency management, for number 89, we have all committee members in favor of keeping it as a priority. The same is for number 90, so that will remain as a priority. Moving on to number 91, under Parks, Culture, and Wellness, we have all committee members in favor of keeping this as a priority. The same can be said for number 92, where we have all in favor, followed by the same for number 93, 94, and in regards to number 95, we have 6 committee members in favor of keeping it, 2 requesting further discussion, so that priority will remain as an action, or action will remain as a priority. And lastly, we have number 96, where we had 7 in favor of keeping it as a priority and 1 requesting further discussion. So that one will remain as a priority. And then we move on to the final poll, which is also regards to recreation, culture, and wellness under immediate actions for consideration.
I really think we should, in future, build in an essay component to these exams. You know, the multiple choice is fine, but only to a certain extent.
Well, this is accountability. Like, we've read through every single action and we're voting on it. Careful what you wish for. Road to hell.
All right. Thank you, everybody. All right, regards to number 97, we have 5 in favor of keeping the priorities, so that will remain. Number 98, we have 6 in favor of keeping the priorities, so that will remain. Number 99, we have 7 in favor, so the action will remain. For number 100, we had 8 committee members in favor, so that's a priority. Number 101, we have 7 keeping as a priority, so that will remain. And number 102, we have 8 committee members in favor to keep it as a priority. Where was I? 103, we have 6 in favor of keeping as a priority. So that will remain. And lastly, we have 104, which is 5 to keep as priorities. So that one will also remain. Thank you, everybody. That went very smoothly. We weren't sure how it was going to go. So we appreciate everyone's time and effort put into this. So the option that we brought forward as staff in our staff report is whether to maintain this approach to going through the priority actions, because we do still have Empower that we didn't get to today. So it did move quite smoothly, but there is the opportunity to provide you the actions in advance of the GPC meetings for you to review and to vote on them. And then for staff to then just bring forward the ones that require further discussion. So we're asked the committee to consider that motion in the staff report and which approach you'd prefer to do with the GPCs moving forward.
Thank you. So, yes, first of all, thank you for your work on this and for your patience. So, Council, we do have 2 options, and they're on page 28 of my agenda. If I read it correctly, option 1 is to do things a little bit differently in future, where Council would receive the information, vote basically in their own private space, and then we would deal with the results at a meeting. And the second option is to proceed as we did today, looking at the options and voting as we've just done. So, Councillor Armstrong, I see you on the speakers list.
Yeah, I just have a question. You know, I appreciate that we're picking priorities, whatever. Is there going to be an will staff then determine which priorities go first versus, like, you know, we've said, okay, we agree with all these priorities, then will it go to staff to determine the order of the priorities and the timeline? I guess what my concern is, where we've already allocated a council motion and a budget to it, from my perspective, I would like to see those as a priority, because I don't understand how you're going to identify priorities. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, thank you. That's actually a very helpful point to have some discussion and consensus on, because obviously what we've seen is with many of your council motions here, you've re-endorsed them, and you're right, they're already endorsed in budget. And so what we can do is, when we come back to you in May, when you'll actually have an opportunity to vote on the endorsed, all of the things that you've given us direction on, we can raise the ones with a star and the budget amount up to the top of each section and category, so you can see by that virtue they can be prioritized that way, rather than staff trying to guess what those are. You're giving us some of that feedback by the numbers you're voting on, and as you pointed out, the fact that you've already allocated budget and you've reinforced it as a motion. I'm wondering, there may be some others that come up that you put in play that we'd appreciate you raising that up. And I guess one other option we have is on the 29th is you would get to see it, where we would put those with the star and the $sign and any others that we see very strong support for in a ranking order.
And then
that's helpful.
And then just my second point too, if there are priorities in there that don't have an assigned budget or staff capacity, I would like to know that too, because it's great to vote on something, then I find out, oh my goodness, this is going to cost like 50 million or whatever. So I would like to know if there's going to be budget implications or staffing implications. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Good points. Mayor Krog.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I must say, as much as it may involve more staff and a bit tedious in some respects, especially when we're voting 100% in favor of something, the reality is today there were a couple of occasions where we asked questions of staff that had an influence on the vote. And in the interest of openness and transparency, because we are deciding the priorities for the people of the city of Nanaimo, I think it's more important that we meet and do this collectively in an open space and an open council meeting, rather than something, quote unquote, I hate to use the term behind closed doors, but it would literally be behind closed doors.
Thank you. I have a couple of other speakers. I'm wondering if they are questions, or can we get a motion on the floor and speak to the motion? So, Councillor Geselbrecht, question of staff, or?
I could speak after the motions on the floor.
Thank you, and same, Councillor Eastmere. Thank you. So, can we get a motion on the floor?
I'll move recommendation.
And which one, Councillor
There's only
Helms?
one recommendation. recommendation unless.
There's two options.
Oh, but she's moving the recommendation, not the option. In the report, it's one recommendation.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm reading the report to support their approach and proposed schedule.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. You're right. There is one recommendation, but there are also a couple of options on how to proceed. So I'm just not clear on if you need which option we want or just the recommendation.
Recommendation's option one.
So I'm sorry, I'm still looking to staff to clarify what we need.
Through the chair to Councillor Thorpe, and I'll also look to Ms. Gurry to guide me, what would be helpful is if you're not wanting to move forward with the recommended option that you pick, the alternate option, or if there's other direction you'd like to give us. I think that, now in terms of process, Ms. Gurry, is that the right way to do it?
Thank you, Chair, through you and Ms. Bullpulsing. I believe what the committee is looking for right now is that they want to move forward, and I've heard it suggested by the mayor that they would like to go forward using the approach that was used today by doing the polling questions live because that allowed for discussion and feedback from staff. So I think the motion or the recommendation that is in the reports don't speak exactly to those methods.
I've got a question.
Through the chair, option number 1 is to do the survey at home, and then we bring back the results. Option number 2 is to remain as we're doing today.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So somebody could make the motion based on that information would be great.
I got a question.
So I'm seeing a little or hearing a little bit of confusion here. There is one recommendation, but then there are also the two options. So Councillor Hemmens, I appreciate your intent, but I think we need to be a little bit more specific.
Option 2.
So Councillor Hemmens is moving the staff recommendation with option 2.
Second.
Councillor Armstrong is seconding. Now, Councillor Geselbrock.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a little bit of confusion beforehand. So how we're doing it now is we're slowly doing the survey during like everybody's time, and then the survey comes in, and then we go through, and the ones that need discussion, we're having the discussion, which allows us to ask the question, get staff feedback, have a bit of thing. What option 1 is saying is, instead of doing the survey slowly here and like waiting for Ben to like read through the thing and like press the button, do that before we come to council. So you sit down, go through, do the survey shows up here, then it goes up on the screen, and then we go through like we do and have discussions on it. I would far more support that than the option 2 where we do the actual survey in here. Am I understanding that correctly? So option 1 is actually you go on your own time, quickly fill out the survey, and then the survey shows up here and then allows for that thorough discussion on the ones that need to happen. That makes more sense to me. So I don't support option 2 motion because I think that we can save everybody a little bit of time by just doing it at home and then having the exact robust discussion here in a way that it seemed that everybody did appreciate and like. So,
Mr. Chair, I think the survey will be going out in advance, so you could practice going through the survey. So that, I think today you were getting it cold and you weren't getting a chance to, in fairness, so you would actually have time to think about it, so you could probably do that fairly quickly at the meeting. But I understand what you're saying.
We could do both. Just send the survey beforehand. I can practice.
You could practice and know what your it's being prepared for the meeting is really all you'd be doing is reading materials and decide how you'd like to allocate your time, and then it could be put together pretty quickly at the meeting.
Thank you, and I appreciate your comments, Councillor Geselbrock, and I think you're quite right, and your point's well taken. I personally found this quite enjoyable, and if we get the survey ahead of time, you can always, crib notes on the hand are effective when you. I know all the tricks. So there is a motion on the floor. It's for option 2. Councillor Eastmuir.
yeah, I support this motion. I'm happy to wait for you, Ben, if you need the time. And I think just there was really important clarifications that came up during the discussion today that I think would just be really helpful to have in the moment. And I don't want to miss the opportunity if we vote a certain way and then it not come up. I think that would be a real missed opportunity. So happy to support this motion and happy to wait for you.
Thank you, Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support the motion. I'd also like an opportunity, though, for councillors, if there are questions about any one of these particular things, to maybe bring it up to have a discussion. Because when we're voting saying, well, we don't, let's just move forward, 5 of us said let's move forward, but there may be some valid questions that we want to have for discussion, just for clarifying some of these priorities. And I would like that opportunity regardless, to bring that up in a meeting.
Thank you. Good point. I'm seeing no other speakers, so I will call the question on endorsing the recommendation with option 2. All those in favor, please. And any opposed? I see none opposed, so that passes. Thank you, Council. Ms. Bhopal Singh.
I just want to make it clear to Council that you will be getting the final package, which you will be actually making a motion on endorsing as we get all the different pieces. And so while you're giving us direction right now, and we're taking that, you'll get the full package. The other thing I wanted to check in with you is you've given some good feedback about how this has worked for you, and you've now given us direction to continue with that. You can also feel free to bring up things that you don't see us, if there's anything missing for you in terms of priorities. So just want to ensure that you're aware of that, and you've got a whole smorgasbord of things in the future, pieces here. And I know that Chair Thorpe really wants homework, so for those of you who would like to, you can look ahead. You can look at the next one we're doing is an empowered Nanaimo, and then we follow on to a green Nanaimo in the schedule. So you can look ahead at what these are and think about what your questions are around them. And that might also help you so that you're not so much in the moment as you were today. So I just wanted to remind you that just because we were presenting you with this suite of what we think your priorities might be, you can still bring forward anything else that you think may be missing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bhopal Singh, Ms. Bagan, and staff, all staff. Thank you for your work today. I believe we are at the end of our agenda, except for a question period. And we did have a member of the audience earlier. Mr. Sims is indicating there are no questions, so
Chair.
Motion to adjourn.
No, Chair.
Chair.
I've got my thing to speak there. Sorry.
Oh, yes.
No, right on. No, I did have a few comments just on the process and this and questions just on their overall thing. So I'll try to make them brief and quick. One, thank you for all the work putting this all together. Just the way that it's all organized, it does bring a lot of coherence to the whole planning process, and it really links objectives to actions. And one question is that Councillor Armstrong brought up, I think it is appropriate, this is the appropriate level of scale to be providing direction on. Does it feel that it's overly getting too into operational directions? That's the first question just to staff, or if this is the useful level of direction and commentary on.
Through the chair to Councillor Gesser-Park, as you notice, we're giving you very broad topics. We're not saying we're going to do a specific action in a specific way. We're just getting your direction confirmation that you want it done. So I think I'd look to Mr. Sims, Mr. Rudolph, and also Mr. Harding. I'll give my perspective, but I think it's useful to hear theirs. For me, I think this is a useful level. I do like Councillor Armstrong's suggestion of trying to prioritize within the priorities. I think that's helpful given the numbers that we have. So that's my perspective on it, and also making sure that it aligns with the strategic priorities. And you'll notice that they are embedded in this. So I'll pause there and see what Mr. Sims, Harding, and Mr. Rudolph think.
I saw Mr. Harding anxious to comment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and to Councillor Gesselbrecht. So one of the reminders of when we integrated all these different plans together, particularly, I'll speak for ours, Parks, Recreation, Culture, if we did a Parks, Recreation, and Culture master plan, they would have a whole bunch of objectives and some specific tasks that we'd have. Historically, we'd have a Parks Commission that would recommend, and then the Council. So I think because it's integrated in a city plan, we do want to get those. Where do you want us to spend some time and attention, particularly on some improvements and projects? A lot of it is capital projects, but also on programming and things like that, because that's what you would normally see in a Parks, Recreation, and Culture master plan, which is now embedded into city plan. If that helps.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Sims.
Thanks, Chair. Similarly, I would say that, this, I use the active transportation or the transportation master plan as one of the component documents of the city plan. So in that, we would be asking council to endorse the overall concepts and which would include a number of actions. So that's really what we're doing here. It feels high level enough to me that we're not setting timelines and dollar values, and those things will unfold as time goes on.
Right. Great. The second comment is this is minor to a certain extent, but I did smilingly notice that when I was talking about the Nanaimo framework, and there was a key word that was dropped, and I think for consistency with already what's been published in the official community plan, as to just keep it the Nanaimo donut framework. And I know that there was some commentary in our strategic planning about not making a frufala around it, and big deal around recommitment, but I think consistency of what we've been calling an official community plan and not trying to drop a name to avoid controversy. I think that we can just continue on calling it what we've been calling it, and I think there was an election on our official community plan, and the community did affirm their support for what we did vote in, and so I think the donut framework is being adopted in North Saanich. It's in the official community plan for North Cowichan. I think keeping the name consistent through our official community plan documentation with the action plan, and not, because I don't know if there was specific direction to change it from Nanaimo donut framework to Nanaimo framework, but I think that's something I did notice.
Through the chair to Council Gesselbrecht, we actually heard the direction from the strategic planning process, and we made the assumption that it was to be carried forward into this document. So thank you for clarifying that that's not the case, so we can adjust accordingly.
Right.
So we were listening as staff to that level, thinking that it applied to this level.
Yeah. Yeah,
so that's not the case.
I think it might. I think it could have been a bit of an overinterpretation.
Okay.
My comments on sort of like not doing a big grand reaffirmation of our commitment to the framework just meant we don't need to, have wide publicity event around in that, but to just keep doing what we've been doing and what the community expects us. So, thank you. Just the final point I just want to make, I really do appreciate the effort staff put in how to bring this forward and the experimentation with the survey and this process. And I think that, we are building the system of how to work through this very large integrated plan and really building this coherent framework of being able to say what we're doing, setting the objectives, making actions, and then having that built in our business planning cycle. And so, I know there's going to be kinks in the process working it out, and we're trying new stuff, and I think that's the important thing, is trying new and building this thing. So anyhow, thanks for the effort on it, and I look forward to the future sessions on this. So,
thank you, Councillor Gesselbrecht. And maybe on that note, you'd move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
So moved, seconded, all in favor, opposed, carried. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a good evening.